A somber reflection echoes through the void, revealing that the things she truly desires are always entirely out of her reach. A beautiful young woman stares blankly ahead, completely lost in her own melancholic thoughts. She hopelessly concludes that no matter how hard she tries, praying to the gods endlessly brings no change. Heartbreak washes over her as she realizes that the chosen one is always someone else and never her. Tears streaming down her face, Emily clutches Lord Ernest in a loving embrace and confesses she has loved him for so long. With a pained expression, Emily acknowledges she wouldn't be chosen since Ernest is already engaged to her sister. Desperate for just a fleeting moment of connection, she begs Ernest to let her express the true feelings hidden in her heart. Refusing to hold back, Ernest passionately interjects that he truly feels the exact same way about her. Overwhelmed by the intense emotion, Emily pleads with him to stop speaking. Despite her true and deep feelings for him, Emily insists she cannot bring herself to betray her beloved dearest sister. Ernest gazes down at her with unwavering affection, softly speaking her name into the quiet air. The devastating reflection of the illicit lovers embracing plays clearly in the wide eye of a hidden observer. Lady Chloe stands completely still behind a stone pillar, silently taking in the heartbreaking betrayal unfolding before her. Chloe vividly watches her fiancé, the old landmark heir Ernest, holding her pure and sunny younger sister Emily in a crystal-clear scene. The crushing reality finally sets in as she confronts the scene of her own sister and fiancé meeting in secret. Watching Emily sob like a dramatic tragic heroine, Chloe bitterly thinks to herself that she is the one who truly deserves to cry. A sharp pain pierces her heart as the man she longed for since childhood is stolen away by her own sister. She painfully admits that for the two star-crossed lovers, this is genuinely a tragedy and far from amusing. In a moment of quiet resignation, Chloe acknowledges she already knew her sister had romantic feelings for Ernest. Looking back on the past, she realized at some specific point that a shift had occurred between them. She vividly remembers noting exactly how Ernest looked at Emily with undeniable and pure tenderness. Knowing her father only cared about forging political ties with the old land marquis, Chloe decided to ignore the genuine romance to avoid stepping aside. She desperately tries to reassure her own heart that her selfish actions do not mean she doesn't love her little sister. With utmost sincerity, she maintains that her younger sister's happiness truly means the world to her. Despite her familial devotion, she couldn't bring herself to let go because she was also deeply in love with Ernest. The crushing reality remains that her heart has been completely devoted to him for this entire time. Having believed since childhood that they would grow up to marry, the mere thought of building a peaceful home together made her heart race. Driven entirely by that romantic desire, she worked incredibly hard in countless ways to become the woman he deserved. But a singular, devastating realization forces its way through all of her lifelong preparations. She tragically understands that Ernest felt no love for her and viewed their engagement strictly as a necessary political arrangement. The original plan dictated that their grand wedding was supposed to happen 2 years ago when they turned 18. In a desperate bid for more time to win his heart, she personally made the decision to delay the marriage until they turned 20. She reflects on the painful truth that waiting until they were 18 ultimately changed absolutely nothing. Sorrow consumes her soul as the absolute certainty settles in that she simply wasn't chosen. Ernest abruptly turns his head with a sharp, unreadable expression as the atmosphere shifts dramatically. Shock and dread ripple across Chloe's delicate features as the scandal begins to unfold in front of her. Loud voices suddenly pierce the night, drawing everyone's attention to Ernest and the lovely night breeze. Scandalous whispers erupt among the guests as they question why an unmarried man is alone in the garden with Lady Emily instead of his fiancée Lady Chloe. Trembling from the unbearable humiliation, Chloe clutches her chest and breathes heavily in the shadows. A voice formally excuses itself, noting that their scandalous relationship is already drawing massive attention in society. Chloe internally questions the catastrophic meaning behind society finding out the two lovers were alone together. She grimly realizes that it is absolutely clear they both understand the severe consequences of their actions. A sickening thought crosses her mind that they might have actually wanted everyone to witness their affair. She solidly concludes that drawing public attention is the exact reason they purposely returned together. The ultimate humiliation strikes her core as she notes that Ernest didn't even bother to look at her during the spectacle. Retreating to the safety of her chambers, Chloe collapses face first onto her bed in complete emotional ruin. Tears stream violently down her cheeks as she releases her suppressed anguish and sobs openly. Through her heavy tears, she realizes it is only a matter of time before Ernest formally asks to break the engagement. Exactly as she predicted, a formal letter stating the cancellation of her engagement arrives shortly from the Oldland Marquis family. Her father cruelly informs her that she was tossed aside to make way for her sister, bluntly asking if Chloe is okay with this outcome. Yielding to her cruel reality, Chloe softly confirms her father's statement with a quiet, "Yes, father." A heavy letter sits on the desk, sealing the heartbreaking confirmation of her sister Emily's new engagement. Her father averts his eyes in weak sympathy, audaciously claiming he knows exactly how she must feel about the situation. Pressing the emotional blade deeper, he asks if she can find it in her heart to celebrate her younger sister's happiness. A terrifying shadow obscures Chloe's true emotions as she forces out a chillingly compliant, "Of course." Chloe bitterly recalls that ever since their mother died 8 years ago, her father has always burdened her with expectations while openly favoring Emily. His stern voice echoes in her memory, demanding she act as a proper lady and the flawless future wife of the Oldland Marquis. Standing dutifully in mourning attire, a younger Chloe simply answers, "Yes, father," locking away her own desires. She spent countless grueling hours disciplining herself to perfectly manage her emotions, ensuring she always smiled like gentle spring sunshine. Conversely, her father never scolded her sister for showing emotion, allowing Emily to cry and laugh freely. A genuine pang of envy pierces Chloe's heart as she openly admits she is jealous of her sister's unrestrained freedom. Despite the bitter jealousy, she sincerely loves Emily's innocent cheerfulness just as much as anyone else. Tragically, Ernest was also completely captivated by every pure expression and unfiltered emotion Emily showed him. Turning away from her father, Chloe excuses herself while internally scoffing at the deep irony of her situation. Walking away with quiet dignity, she resolves to bless her sister's union even though the betrayal tears her apart. She tries to convince herself that even if she failed in love, her sister is still her precious family. Emily suddenly crashes into her with a tearful embrace, calling out to the sister who means absolutely everything to her. Sobbing wildly, Emily begs Chloe to give her this love, claiming Chloe already has everything compared to her. Shocked by the bizarre request, Chloe questions what her sister means by asking her to give the engagement away. Tears streaming down her flushed face, Emily desperately points out that Chloe's engagement to Ernest has already been decided. Emily grips her dress in sheer panic, asking if Chloe is completely serious about marrying the man they both love. Forcing a heartbreakingly gentle smile, Chloe masks her devastated soul and smoothly replies, "Of course." The tension shatters as Emily stammers quietly in response to her sister's forced grace. Looking up with hopeful eyes, Emily selfishly asks if Chloe simply doesn't love Lord Ernest anymore. A jagged silence fills Chloe's mind as she vehemently denies the cruel assumption in her own heart. Realizing that denying Emily's words would only cause more pain, Chloe internally wishes her sister happiness. Accepting the role of the villain, she decides to quietly take the blame and surrender the happiness her sister easily claimed. Chloe leans heavily against the closed door, the weight of her sacrifice finally crushing her composure. She solemnly reflects that all her desperate years of longing to be the woman Ernest deserved were completely in vain. A profound emptiness swallows her as she realizes every sacrifice she made was ultimately for nothing. Now 20 and discarded, she faces a bleak future where her sister stole her fiancé and the ensuing scandal ruined her marriage prospects. Determined not to become a shameful burden to her family, she silently vows to live the rest of her life quietly. Knowing she would only be a mark of shame at the wedding, she plans to isolate herself on a distant estate and live alone. During their single conversation after the broken engagement, Ernest ruthlessly admitted he knew he had wronged her. Instead of apologizing, he cowardly justified his betrayal by claiming Chloe was strong and didn't need his help. The ghostly visages of Ernest and Emily torment Chloe, haunting her isolated thoughts. Furious at their excuses, Chloe cries out internally that she is only standing by gritting her teeth, furious that they use her strength against her. A primal urge rises within her to scream and cry, to violently demand why he chose Emily over her. Yet a chilling realization halts her rage, knowing that even if she broke down, he would never choose her anyway. Staring out into the falling rain, she desperately rationalizes that stepping aside was truly her best option. Rather than wallowing in the despair of being unloved, she searches for a peaceful escape. She firmly decides it is better to give up everything and live quietly alone where she can finally find peace. Wiping away a stray tear, Chloe looks over her packed belongings and whispers, "I guess." Surrounded by numerous traveling trunks, she gathers her resolve and notes that this quiet departure will have to do. Her father's shallow advice echoes in her mind, suggesting she hide at the estate until the high society gossip dies down. Chloe knows the agonizing truth that the feeling of being unwanted and the mark of scandal will never truly fade. Tying up her hair with newfound determination, she resolves to devote her future to the people of the estate instead. Stepping into the hallway, she immediately notices that the servants are unusually frantic and noisy today. A flustered maid spots her and calls out, prompting Chloe to calmly address her as May. May breathlessly reports they just received notice that the young Duke Ciceriel, Lord Lionel, is arriving today. Startled by the confirmed arrival of Lord Lionel, the heir to the Ciceriel Duke's house, Chloe notes her family has no connection to them. A servant admits that even Chloe's father hasn't been told the reason yet, leaving them to wonder what the visitors could possibly want. Hearing that everyone is panicking over his sudden visit today, she questions if it could be a trade deal or business discussion. The grand exterior of the estate stands quietly under the dusky twilight sky. The servant approaches to politely call for her lady. Hesitantly, the servant explains that Chloe's father asked her to come get her. Confused, Chloe wonders why her father wants her now, especially since it's been 2 hours since Lord Lionel arrived. Announcing her presence at the door, Chloe asks for a pardon and is granted permission by her father to enter the room. Walking in, she nervously questions what on earth her father could possibly want. She finally lays eyes on the striking young duke, Lord Lionel Ciceriel. These are two solitary individuals who have never before crossed paths. Her father formally introduces her as his eldest daughter, Chloe, to Lord Ciceriel. Bowing respectfully, Chloe Clay-all declares it an honor to meet the young lord and wishes him great health. Chloe lowers her gaze in a polite, flawless curtsy before the unexpected noble guest. She casts a quiet glance upward, taking in the impressive sight of Lord Lionel Ciceriel. With his handsome appearance and title as the Ciceriel heir, he is a man surrounded by endless rumors and the constant talk of noble ladies. Gently kissing her hand, the young lord claims he has heard much about her. Flattering her smoothly, he confesses he has long wanted to get closer to the Count's beautiful and admirable daughter. Maintaining her composure, Chloe politely deflects the compliment by telling him that is far too kind. Though she knows rumors say he isn't shallow, she easily understands his popularity among women due to his reassuringly sweet features and skillful, flattering speech. She quietly observes that it is quite rare for someone of his high social status to not have a fiancé yet. Lionel turns to the Count, confirming that if they get Lady Chloe's approval, they will proceed in that direction as discussed. The Count eagerly expresses his deep gratitude for the young lord's immense kindness. Completely bewildered by the exchange, Chloe admits to herself that she has absolutely no idea what is going on. With a brief farewell, her father suddenly turns and shuts the heavy door behind him. Chloe stares in silent shock as her father abruptly abandons her in the room. A heavy, awkward silence fills the lavish space as the two are left entirely alone. Panicking internally, she wonders what her father could be thinking by leaving an unmarried man and woman alone together upon their very first meeting. Breaking the tense quiet, Lord Lionel gently calls out to Lady Chloe. He courteously gestures and asks her to please have a seat. Pouring her a cup of tea, he apologizes for acting as the host even though she is the guest, which she nervously waves off as fine. Smiling warmly, he asks her not to be so tense and requests that she please listen to what he has to say. Sipping the surprisingly sweet tea, Chloe mentally argues that asking her not to be tense in this bizarre situation is simply impossible. Without warning, Lord Lionel straightforwardly asks if she will marry him. As Chloe freezes with wide eyes, he calmly repeats that he would like her to marry him. He confesses in a serious tone that he has liked her for a long time, acknowledging she may be surprised by the sudden proposal. Stunned, she desperately wonders why he is doing this and if she is being teased, though his serious demeanor doesn't seem that way. Despite saying he liked her, Chloe notices his tone is as soft as a mere announcement, completely lacking any passion at all. Ironically, recognizing his total lack of romantic emotion helps her suddenly become calm. Setting her teacup down with a sharp clink, she boldly challenges him, asking if this proposal is one where she actually has a choice. Chuckling softly, Lionel admits that her sharp defiance is exactly what he finds charming about her. Chloe narrows her eyes slightly, maintaining her resolute and piercing silence. With his smile fading, he confirms that there are, of course, choices for her to make. Despite his reassurance that there are choices, Chloe mentally calculates the grim reality of the situation. She realizes this proposal is officially coming from the unimaginably powerful Duke of Caesariel. Knowing her family is nothing more than a mere count's family, she concludes there is absolutely no way they could refuse this. She coldly asks him if it is truly necessary to confirm her will on matters that have already been decided. Acknowledging her lower position, Chloe states she doesn't know how this discussion started, but she ultimately has no choice but to obey. She sarcastically apologizes if she made him angry, adding that her personal opinion is probably not necessary anyway. Unfazed by her icy demeanor, Lionel replies that he thought it would be better to speak directly rather than avoiding the topic. Stating that this direct approach is his way of showing sincerity, Lord Lionel calmly addresses the bewildered lady. Realizing she doesn't need flattery or sweet words, Chloe carefully considers his blunt demeanor. Sipping her tea, she acknowledges that his refusal to deceive her with insincere words might actually be a genuine form of sincerity. Still deeply confused, she confesses her inability to understand how this conversation even started or what benefit he gains by flaunting the duchy's authority to marry her. Smirking knowingly, Lionel points out that her bewildered expression gives her internal conflict away entirely. Defeated by his sharp perception, Chloe quietly admits that he has seen right through her. He playfully asks if she never thought a man could harbor long-held love for a beautiful and intelligent woman like her, an idea she instantly shuts down as impossible. Dismissing his sudden confession, she points out the highly suspicious timing of him revealing his feelings right after her engagement to Lord Ernesto was cancelled. Bitterly staring ahead, she reflects that the world will only ever view her as a discarded woman who was abandoned by her fiancé after a years-long engagement. Keeping her guard up, Chloe firmly states there is absolutely no way the young lord could harbor any special feelings for her. Suddenly breaking the tension, Lionel throws his head back and bursts into genuine, hearty laughter at her unapologetic bluntness. Flustered by his reaction, she fiercely scolds him, calling his sudden marriage proposal and subsequent laughter incredibly rude. Amused by her defiance, he admits that being spoken to so frankly and without any pretense is a completely new and refreshing experience for him. Smiling warmly, he asks for forgiveness for his breach of etiquette but notes that he simply doesn't believe everything she just said. Her eyes widen in pure shock as she realizes he is directly questioning the judgment of her former fiancé. His gaze turning sharp, Lionel fiercely declares that a man who would abandon a woman with such wisdom and beauty is nothing but a fool. Glaring intensely, he reiterates that Ernesto is an absolute fool for casting her aside. Taken aback by his aggressive defense of her, she murmurs that his harsh insult is going a little too far. Leaning in closer, he challenges her loyalty, asking how she can still defend a man after he committed such a terrible betrayal. Pinning her with a heavy stare, he bluntly demands to know if she still loves Ernesto. Black ink splatters across the panel as Chloe freezes, her widened eyes betraying the deep, lingering wound in her heart. Dark, faceless silhouettes of her former fiancé and another woman laughing mockingly flood her painful memories. Breaking her out of the nightmare, Lionel gently places his gloved hands over hers to stop her anxious trembling. Kneeling courteously before her on the couch, the young lord holds her hands in a surprisingly tender gesture. Softly warning her, he points out that gripping her dress so tightly will only end up hurting her. He carefully pries her tense, clenched fingers apart, gently observing the red marks left on her pale palm. Taking a patterned handkerchief from his pocket, he tenderly wraps it around her trembling wrist to soothe her. Gazing into her eyes, he calmly admits that he already knows she still cares deeply for Ernesto. Without a hint of jealousy, he reassures her that her lingering feelings are perfectly fine with him. Promising never to blame her for infidelity, he declares it doesn't matter who she cares for as long as she becomes his wife. He clarifies the cold reality of their arrangement, explaining that this is merely a marriage of convenience where she only needs to maintain appearances. The strategic brilliance of the proposal becomes clear, as allying with her neutral family will grant his father favorable conditions and leverage over the Ordland Marquis family's Northern Railroad project. Stunned by the flawless political maneuvering, Chloe mentally applauds his impressive and calculated tactics. She deduces aloud that his true goal is to gain a foothold in the lucrative Northern Railroad project pushed by the Ordland family. By taking her in, the Caesariel duchy perfectly counters the Ordland Marquis family, exploiting the fact that Ernesto is set to marry Lionel's sister in a tangled web of power. She realizes the rumors of his supreme capability are entirely true, seeing how swiftly he capitalized on her broken engagement without hesitation. Closing the distance between them, Lionel grasps her hand intimately, causing her to flinch at the sudden proximity. Blushing furiously, she listens as he promises he has no intention of forcing her into anything she absolutely opposes. Flustered by an intimacy she never even shared with Ernesto, she hears his vow that despite being a contract, they will live a married life together for many years. Pulling back slightly to give her space, he assures her it is perfectly fine to refuse if she truly cannot accept the arrangement. Calculating the grim reality, she knows that given her family's lower status, rejecting the powerful Ciceriel Duke is practically impossible. Gripping the handkerchief he tied around her hand, she resolves that her only option is to test how far he is willing to compromise on the terms. A dark, empty splatter of ink violently marks the page, reflecting the hollow void left within her chest. Reflecting on her trampled heart, she despairs over whether her simple wish to live peacefully has truly become impossible. She bitterly acknowledges that being a duchess in a loveless, arranged marriage is no different from being a well-kept housekeeper. Deep in her soul, she knows this cold, transactional life is the exact opposite of what she truly desires from the bottom of her heart. Convinced she will never be able to desire anything again, she fears that taking his hand will signify the absolute end of her true self. A quiet, resigned melancholy washes over her delicate features as she silently contemplates her sealed fate. Noticing her prolonged, heavy silence, Lionel gently calls out Lady Chloe's name to bring her back. Snapping back to reality with a fierce new resolve, Chloe boldly announces that she has conditions for this marriage. A strikingly handsome man with a sharp, calculating gaze smirks confidently into the distance. Gazing up with unwavering resolve, the beautiful young woman asks if he will listen to her daring request. Reaching out to gently touch his hand, she vows to accept the offer only if the Marquis truly loves and cherishes her. Flashing a brilliant, warm smile, she playfully questions whether it isn't completely natural to seek love within a marriage. Despite her teasing words, she mentally acknowledges the bitter reality that finding true love in this arranged marriage is entirely impossible. Leaning in closely, she demands sincere treatment to match his proclaimed love, especially knowing Lord Lionel's reputation with women means he wouldn't be satisfied with a wife who simply refuses him after marriage. Her sharp words hang heavily in the air, acting as a highly calculated and convenient excuse to outright refuse him. The atmosphere instantly shifts as a sudden, unspoken tension crackles between the two fated nobles. To her absolute shock, Lionel suddenly surges forward and pulls her tightly into a forceful, breathless embrace. Flustered and panicking, she frantically questions her lord's actions, only for him to demand she use his actual name. Staring intensely into her widened eyes, he firmly insists that she drop all formalities and simply call him Lionel. Blushing furiously at the impossible situation, she is left completely stunned when he confidently smirks and accepts her outrageous terms. He leans in aggressively with sudden intimacy, causing her heart to race as she freezes in sheer, unadulterated panic. Trembling slightly with a deeply flushed face, she stares back at him in utter, wide-eyed confusion. Releasing her from his grasp with a playful chuckle, he declares he has no intention of forcing himself on a woman who genuinely dislikes it. Turning his piercing gaze back to her trembling form, he bluntly compliments her by telling her she is incredibly cute. Still reeling from his sudden and drastic shift in tone, she repeats his unexpected compliment in sheer disbelief. Thoroughly overwhelmed by the intense praise, she pinches the bridge of her nose and tries to hide her deeply flushed face. Her heart pounds wildly in her chest as she realizes that no one has ever genuinely told her she is cute before. With a renewed, burning intensity, he promises to make an immediate effort to meet her strict conditions, even if it seems entirely impossible. Closing the distance once more, he firmly declares that their marital contract is now officially established. Flashing a devastatingly handsome smirk, he leans in and mockingly asks if she is okay with this new arrangement. Burning bright red from head to toe, she clutches her forehead in a dizzying, heart-stopping panic. Finding her immensely flustered reaction highly amusing, his eyes crinkle as he lets out a soft, delighted chuckle. His soft amusement quickly erupts into full-blown, joyous laughter that echoes brightly through the elegant room. A sudden shift in the narrative reveals that she has harbored deep, undeniable feelings for him for many long years. Dressed elegantly in a gorgeous gown, she radiates pure, uncontainable happiness as she stands dutifully by his side. Despite his complete lack of straightforwardness, it is painfully evident to everyone that he deeply cares for her in return. A gentle, incredibly warm smile graces her delicate features as she looks toward her presumed future. Watching her glow with such pure joy, he internally notes the stunning beauty of her radiant, heartfelt smile. Downing a glass of wine, he reflects on how frustrating their past misunderstandings were, making their eventual happiness a true joy to witness. Suddenly gripping his collar in distress, he is struck by a painful, suffocating tightness blooming deep within his chest. With a heavy, sinking heart, he finally accepts that it was never his place to interfere in their deeply intertwined lives. Lowering his gaze to the floor, he bitterly admits that his hidden hopes were nothing more than a selfish, pathetic delusion. Tortured by relentless thoughts of what could have been, he thoroughly despises himself for harboring such petty, lingering regrets. Desperate for a fleeting moment of peace, he decides to slip away from the stifling party and escape into the quiet courtyard. His quiet escape is suddenly interrupted by a desperate, pleading voice echoing from the deep shadows of the garden. A young woman firmly states her admiration for Lord Ernest, swearing she would never do anything to betray her beloved older sister. Unable to hold back his intense feelings, Lord Ernest breathes out Millie's name with forbidden, burning longing. Peeking cautiously from behind a stone pillar, the observer wonders what kind of soap opera melodrama he has just stumbled upon. He quickly connects the dots, realizing the son of House Oldland is mutually infatuated with his own fiancée's younger sister. The scandalous, heartbreaking scene perfectly confirms the dark whispers and vicious rumors he had heard floating around high society. Watching the secret lovers, he silently condemns them for cowardly continuing the official engagement while indulging in a forbidden romance. Filled with utter disgust, he glares at their pathetic indecisiveness, thinking they should have broken the engagement to resolve this messy web long ago. His disdain violently shifts to the younger sister, despising how she plays the tragic victim when she is equally guilty of the ultimate betrayal. Sensing the deeply toxic drama unfolding, he turns to leave, silently cursing his terrible luck for witnessing the secret affair firsthand. Looking closer at the betrayed fiancée left lingering in the shadows, he shockingly realizes her face is completely dry. A fierce, heartbreaking realization suddenly strikes him like a physical blow as he watches her trembling form. Realizing she is trying her hardest not to cry, his protective instincts flare, refusing to let her wander the dark, lonely garden by herself. He grimaces at the sickening reality of the situation, utterly disgusted by the tragic way she still clings to her unfaithful, cheating fiancé. Staring intensely ahead, Chloe's sharp gaze hints at a fierce, unspoken resolve. Realizing the immense gravity of the situation, the observer muses that perhaps there is something he can do to help her. Renowned as the absolute pride of her family, Chloe Clayall possesses undeniably beautiful flaxen hair and striking leaf-green eyes. Adding to her immense prestige, she stands as the highly sought-after daughter of the incredibly influential Count Clayall. Despite her undeniable allure, no other man has dared approach her because her deep love and engagement to Marquis Oldland's son are common knowledge. Standing in absolute silence, Lionel intensely contemplates the intricate web of aristocratic politics unfolding before him. Analyzing the grim reality of the situation, he deduces that her fragile engagement is destined to fall apart very soon. A highly calculated realization suddenly dawns upon his sharp, opportunistic mind. He fully realizes that she will finally be completely free from her binding commitments. Understanding her ruined reputation requires a massive dowry she no longer possesses, he recognizes how deeply the Count's railway investments have doomed her marital prospects. Formulating a cunning master plan, he calculates that taking her as his wife without a dowry would grant him massive influence over both the Clayall and Oldland families. Weighing the immense strategic benefits, he concludes that Chloe is the absolute ideal wife for a powerful man like himself. Driven by burning ambition, he firmly resolves not to let such a golden opportunity slip through his fingers. Turning his gaze back to the vibrant party, he watches her radiant form gracefully navigate the crowded, glittering ballroom. Feeling the crushing weight of societal pressure, he acknowledges that he must secure a formal marriage sooner rather than later. Sensing the stars perfectly aligning, he realizes this exact moment is the absolute perfect time to strike. Just as he predicted, vicious rumors quickly spread that Chloe's engagement is annulled while her younger sister shamelessly takes her place. Disgusted by the twisted family dynamics, he notes how the foolish count has utterly spoiled his younger daughter at Chloe's heavy expense. Condemning the father's massive betrayal, he intensely questions how anyone could sacrifice one daughter's entire future just to appease the other. Glaring at his desk, he realizes the count justifies this horrific sacrifice to protect the family's crucial railway investments with the old land family. Wasting absolutely no time, Lionel immediately marches to the Clayall estate to officially propose to the newly disgraced Lady Chloe. Sweating profusely under the intense pressure, Count Clayall stares down in sheer, unadulterated panic. Flashing a disarming, charismatic smile, Lionel completely commands the tense atmosphere of the elegant room. Smoothly breaking the heavy silence, he boldly declares his long-standing admiration for the brilliant Lady Chloe. Utilizing the recent scandalous commotion, he smoothly argues that leaving her in such a deeply unfortunate state would be far too cruel. Delivering his ultimate killing blow, he formally announces his grand intention to welcome her into the Duke's family as his esteemed wife. Trembling under the monumental weight of the offer, the deeply conflicted Count desperately tries to express his formal gratitude. To Lionel's slight surprise, the Count firmly insists that the final marital decision must be left entirely to his betrayed daughter. Staring grimly at the floor, the Count respectfully states that if Chloe refuses, the entire proposal must be rendered completely void. Fully comprehending the terrifying danger of his words, the Count admits he knows exactly what rejecting a duke's offer entails. Clenching his fists with newfound parental resolve, the Count bravely swears to personally bear all the devastating consequences of a potential rejection. Staring intensely at the desperate father, Lionel's piercing gaze silently evaluates the man's surprising display of genuine backbone. Highly amused by the Count's protective nature, Lionel gracefully accepts the terms and promises he will never force her hand. Spending quality time together, Lionel fully immerses himself in deep, captivating conversations with the brilliant Lady Chloe. Utterly enchanted by her sharp intellect, he becomes absolutely convinced that she is the only woman truly fit to rule as the Duchess of Caesariel. Highly impressed by her direct nature, he finds her ability to speak without unnecessary, superficial fluff incredibly refreshing. Thoroughly exhausted by the empty chatter of noblewomen, he completely disregards anyone who foolishly claims she lacks traditional femininity. Listening to her sharp words, he notes how coldly she dismisses Lord Ernest as nothing more than a pathetic fool. Despite her harsh words, he sharply observes her face stiffen, proving she still harbors lingering feelings for her treacherous former fiancé. Empathizing with her silent pain, he acknowledges that discarding a deeply rooted childhood love is practically impossible to do overnight. A heavy, undeniable truth settles between them like a dense, unyielding fog. He fully recognizes that her profound feelings for that foolish man ran incredibly deep. Discarding any foolish romantic notions, he accepts that loveless marriages are perfectly standard as long as she diligently fulfills her noble duties. Staring at her beautiful profile, he mentally accepts the tragic reality that neither of them will ever be with their true loves. Looking into her sorrowful eyes, he feels a strange kinship, realizing they are profoundly alike in their mutual heartbreak. Hoping for a peaceful future, he genuinely believes they can find quiet solace in each other's steady company. Reaching out through the emotional distance, their hands gently bridge the gap to seal their new, unexpected fate. Staring up with unwavering resolve, she boldly states she will accept the proposal only if he truly promises to care for her. Flashing a brilliant, hopeful smile, she playfully asks if it isn't completely natural to seek genuine love within a marriage. Utterly captivated by her impossible demand, he smirks confidently at the thrilling prospect of this highly unexpected condition. Accepting the sudden proposal with a dark hint of amusement, he confidently anticipates that this arranged marriage will turn out to be incredibly interesting. Strolling outside her grand estate, Chloe notes with mild concern that Lord Lionel has been a highly frequent visitor ever since their engagement was officially decided. Lionel cheerfully comments on how refreshing the weather feels as they walk together, eliciting a shy, stuttered agreement from the deeply flustered Chloe. Chloe internally worries about his relentless pace, knowing he constantly makes time to visit despite his heavy involvement in political matters and the crushing responsibility of managing his dukedom's affairs. Gathering her fractured courage, Chloe nervously calls out to Lord Lionel to address the growing anxieties clouding her mind. Feigning a look of mild confusion, Lionel pauses and directly questions if she truly believes he is pushing himself too hard with his constant visits. She gently urges him not to overexert himself traveling to her house, reminding him that his prestigious marriage into the Caesariel dukedom demands an immense amount of grand preparation. Chloe reflects bitterly on her unusual 3-month engagement, an arrangement forced upon her to quickly salvage her tarnished reputation and ensure she married before her younger sister. Crushing guilt washes over her as she considers the massive uproar and physical effort the dukedom must be enduring just to secure her hasty marriage. Dismissing her heavy anxieties with a soft smile, Lionel smoothly insists that he is not doing anything unreasonable and visits simply because he deeply wants to. Despite his reassuring words, a chilling shadow of lingering doubt and melancholy firmly crosses Chloe's quiet expression as she stares at the ground. Her worry intensely persists as she mentally notes that Lionel appears to have lost a highly concerning amount of weight over these past few months. Pinching her own hair nervously, she tries to convince her racing heart that he couldn't possibly be pushing himself to the absolute limit. Taking complete advantage of her visible concern, Lionel smoothly sets his trap by finally admitting that he is indeed a little bit tired. With a predatory and intoxicating charm, he steps closer and boldly requests that Lady Chloe personally soothe his overwhelming fatigue. Frantic alarm bells ring loudly in her mind as she instantly realizes this highly dangerous flow of events is escalating far beyond her control. She frantically attempts to excuse herself by claiming the weather is growing cold, but he completely ignores her retreat by whispering her name. Pulling her violently into a tight embrace, he murmurs into her ear to ask if she hates his touch, leaving her stuttering weakly that she doesn't mind it. Pressing his overwhelming advantage, he demands to know why she hesitates, even as she weakly protests that such intimate contact before marriage is morally wrong. Flustered and desperately struggling against his iron hold, she argues that their engaged status absolutely does not excuse this level of premarital intimacy. Silencing her desperate protests with a confident gaze, he leans in closer and arrogantly claims that everyone engages in these physical expressions. He darkly reminds her that their wedding is less than a month away, meaning she desperately needs to grow accustomed to his suffocating closeness. Weaponizing her own innocent words against her, he smoothly points out that she originally demanded a marriage deeply filled with romantic love. Chloe stammers in utter defense, admitting she set those specific conditions but secretly expected him to dismiss her romantic desires as purely ridiculous. She internally laments that her naive request has resulted in him touching her constantly, rapidly closing the physical and emotional distance between them over the past 2 months. Leaning in for a devastating kiss, Lionel wickedly whispers that they have done this countless times already, entirely ignoring her panicked attempts to stop him. Hot tears prick her eyes as she blushes furiously, clutching his sleeve in a weak, trembling, and utterly futile refusal. His tone dramatically shifts into something undeniably dangerous as he coldly questions her about a mysterious past involving someone else. A shocking revelation vividly flashes through her widening eyes as their lips finally crash together in an overwhelmingly dominant kiss. As his hand firmly grips her waist, she bitterly wonders if the highly serious Ernest would ever dare touch her younger sister with such overwhelming intimacy. The incredibly painful memory surfaces of how her cold former lover only ever touched her with the absolute barest minimum of necessity. Lowering her gaze in quiet, crushing resignation, she finally realizes the profound and terrifying depth of the emotional snare she is currently trapped in. She hopelessly concludes that this incredibly intoxicating brand of affection is utterly poisonous to her deeply vulnerable heart. Lionel stares fiercely down at her with a heavy, magnetic gaze that traps her completely and irrevocably in his dark presence. Caressing her tear-stained cheek with practiced tenderness, he softly and deceptively reassures her that everything is perfectly fine. Completely lost in the scorching heat of the moment, Chloe confesses internally that over the extremely fast past 2 months, her emotional defenses have totally crumbled. Closing her heavy eyes, she fully surrenders to the chilling realization that she has been completely poisoned by his relentless charm. They violently melt together beneath the dappled sunlight, sharing a deeply passionate kiss that ultimately seals her absolute defeat. The quiet, peaceful garden rapidly fills with the highly intimate sounds of their breath and wet kisses as he thoroughly devours her yielding lips. Gasping desperately for air, a soft, involuntary sigh escapes her swollen lips as they finally break their intense physical connection. Smiling triumphantly at her gorgeously flushed face, he teasingly asks if she is somehow still feeling cold after that fiery exchange. Stunned and thoroughly embarrassed to her core, Chloe stammers a nonsensical reply as he chuckles softly at her highly adorable reaction. When he bluntly calls her quite cute, she nervously attempts to brush it off, wildly accusing his words of being mere flattery. Refusing to let her deflect, Lionel steps dangerously closer and earnestly insists that he truly means every single word about her undeniable cuteness. Trembling, Chloe tragically realizes this is the exact trait she fears most: his terrifying ability to effortlessly slip into the core of a defenseless person's heart. She is utterly bewildered by his erratic, unpredictable behavior, noting how he aggressively pushes her down one moment only to gently spoil her the next, completely obscuring his true thoughts. Despite the massive confusion and terrifying fear swirling violently in her mind, a solitary, incredibly conflicting thought violently anchors her to him. He pulls her firmly into another warm embrace, his previously teasing and playful expression shifting instantly into something far more serious and deeply possessive. Looking incredibly deeply into her fragile eyes with an unreadable, piercing intensity, he softly whispers her name as if she is his entire universe. Resting her head completely helplessly against his broad shoulder, Chloe stares blankly into the distance, fully trapped forever within the seductive web of her future husband. Yielding completely to her overwhelming exhaustion, Chloe softly begs Lionel for just a little more time in his arms, since resisting only tires her further. Melting against his broad chest, she secretly confesses to herself that his gentle, possessive touch feels undeniably pleasant. Admitting she doesn't mind his scent or his hands, she decides it would be fine to fall completely if only he would give her verbal permission. A soft, involuntary moan escapes her parted lips as the intense intimacy between them dangerously deepens. Panting heavily under his relentless assault, she struggles frantically to catch her breath while his intoxicating affection overwhelms her senses. The quiet rustle of shifting clothing and soft, wet sounds fill the incredibly tense and heavy air. Pulling her tightly against his body, Lionel ruthlessly deepens their passionate, earth-shattering embrace. Gasping desperately for air, a deeply flushed Chloe weakly calls out Lord Lionel's name in a haze of overwhelming confusion. Staring at him in utter disbelief, she breathlessly demands to know what kind of terrifying person he truly is. Leaning back with a dangerously captivating smile, he smoothly whispers that she is truly something extraordinary. Without a single ounce of hesitation, he boldly confesses that he feels genuine happiness whenever he is with her. Startled by his sudden burst of raw affection, Chloe lets out a soft gasp as he gently sweeps her into his arms. Holding her tenderly against him, Lionel locks his intense, magnetic gaze onto her thoroughly flustered and defenseless expression. Deciding to show a rare moment of restraint, he gently announces that they should leave things at this for today. However, a dark, lingering desire violently flashes in his eyes as he mutters that he is not done yet. Questioning his own utterly foreign emotions, he wonders fiercely why this overwhelming feeling leaves him so deeply unsatisfied. A full month rapidly flashes by, ushering in profound and irreversible changes to their arranged circumstances. Standing incredibly tall in his formal military attire, Lionel waits quietly for the grand events of the day to commence. Looking absolutely breathtaking in her elegant, flower-adorned wedding gown, Chloe prepares to step into her brand new reality. Stepping fully into their new life together, they successfully and peacefully complete their highly anticipated wedding ceremony. Despite the severely rushed timeline, the celebration proves incredibly luxurious, perfectly befitting a prestigious dukedom family. Though she has visited the palace frequently, the stark realization that she is officially living here starting today fills her with dread. Looking utterly exhausted in her heavy wedding dress, she bitterly admits that this massive transition fills her with profound unease. She quietly reflects on the fact that even though she brought her own familiar maids from her family's household, everything feels dangerously foreign. A maid gently assists a silent, highly contemplative Chloe as she bathes to wash away the exhaustion of the grand ceremony. She worries deeply that her trusted maids won't be permitted to attend to all of her personal affairs in this strict new environment. Bowing deeply and respectfully, the maids formally ask for permission to leave their new lady to her evening. Letting out a tired, heavy sigh, Chloe is left completely alone with her violently spiraling thoughts. She stares blankly at the lavishly decorated marital bed, heavily adorned with romantic rose petals for their wedding night. Swallowing her intense nervousness, she quietly accepts her fate and prepares herself for the inevitable consummation. She rationalizes desperately that she doesn't mind Lionel being close or progressing their relationship, especially since they've already shared many passionate kisses. Gripping her nightgown tightly, she brutally reminds herself that bearing an heir was the foundational premise of their agreement from the very start. A close-up of Chloe's trembling lips vividly reveals the deep emotional conflict waging a brutal war inside her fragile heart. Despite being labeled a contractual marriage, Lionel's incredibly tender actions have made her feel like a cherished treasure rather than a mere partner. She admits she originally requested this closeness, but she absolutely never expected him to remain so intensely devoted to her words. Caught in a highly dangerous emotional trap, she finds herself violently torn between resisting her swelling emotions and completely surrendering to them. Blushing furiously, she fights against the intoxicating illusion even though her highly logical mind knows the cold reality is vastly different. The memory of him earnestly calling her beautiful echoes loudly in her mind, deeply shaking her to her very core. Clutching her racing heart, she tragically confesses that at certain moments, his sweet words almost delude her into thinking she is genuinely loved. Touching her swollen lips, a terrifying realization dawns on her that his touches and kisses are no longer enough as she desperately longs for more. Her eyes widen in stark, absolute horror as she finally recognizes the terrifying depth of her own growing, uncontrollable greed. Her trembling hand violently crushes a delicate rose petal on the bedspread, visually representing her rapidly fracturing resolve. Panicking internally, she violently orders herself to immediately stop these dangerous, foolish thoughts before she loses herself completely. She brutally reminds her fragile heart that this entire picture-perfect romance is nothing more than a carefully constructed act. Forcing herself to face a painful reality, she asserts that they are playing a deceitful game of fake love, completely devoid of genuine feelings. She desperately convinces herself that no matter how sweet his words or deep their kisses, his eyes will never reflect true, unconditional warmth. Bitterly comparing her situation to the genuine harmony between Ernest and her sister, she concludes that Lionel's fleeting attraction will never evolve into true love. Staring solemnly into the distance, she accepts that in their aristocratic society of political marriages, faking love is already considered a rare blessing. Choosing temporary warmth over cold reality, she resolves to simply enjoy this comforting illusion for as long as it lasts. Closing her eyes in quiet, tragic resignation, Chloe fully surrenders to her beautifully fabricated happily ever after. Staring thoughtfully with a melancholic yet stunning grace, the young woman begins to mentally gather her scattered emotions. Taking a deep breath in the quiet room, she softly reassures herself that she is finally starting to regain her fragile composure. Startled by a sudden metallic click echoing through the oppressive silence, she turns her head sharply toward the slowly opening door. Emerging from the shadows, a handsome man with disheveled hair stands tall in a loosely tied robe, exuding a captivating and gentle aura. Recognizing his familiar presence, she gazes up with a mix of reverence and undeniable apprehension as she breathes Lord Lionel's name. Stepping into the softly lit chamber, Lord Lionel gazes down with deep, affectionate eyes as he softly calls out to Chloe. Closing the distance between them with deliberate and comforting strides, he questions why she is standing frozen like a statue. Enveloping her delicate frame in a warm and protective embrace, Lord Lionel tenderly asks if he can fetch her something to drink. Melting into his broad chest, Chloe feels her heart deeply touched by his genuine care, realizing that his undivided attention brings her unhesitating happiness. Lifting her effortlessly into his strong arms, he carries her toward the grand bed with the effortless grace of a devoted guardian. Gently lowering her onto the pristine sheets, he treats her with immense reverence as her golden hair spills beautifully across the soft mattress. Hovering above her with a gentle and understanding smile, he quietly asks if his intimate closeness displeases her. Looking up into his mesmerizing eyes, Chloe quickly banishes his doubts, softly but firmly assuring him that she does not mind at all. Noting a sudden shift in his usually composed demeanor, she points out that he seems unusually quiet, playfully turning the focus back to him. Chuckling warmly to dispel the thick tension, Lord Lionel dismisses her observation with a light-hearted laugh, denying any nervousness. Leaning down with undeniable passion, he captures her lips in a sweet, intoxicating kiss that sends a shiver of electricity through the air. Deepening the embrace as their breath mingles, the intensity of their connection blossoms into a breathless and tender exchange. Draped in shadows and opulent fabric, the luxurious canopy bed becomes an isolated sanctuary for the two lovers. As his lips trace a searing path down her sensitive neck, a breathless gasp escapes Chloe's lips, calling out his name in helpless surrender. Trembling beneath his expert caresses, she quickly realizes that his intimate touch doesn't bother her in the slightest. Overwhelmed by a sudden rush of unfamiliar desire, A deep blush spreads across her cheeks as she finds herself craving even more of his affection. Writhing softly beneath him, every gentle brush of his skin sends delightful, heart-pounding tremors through her entire body. A chorus of sweet, desperate sighs and soft moans fills the quiet room as they lose themselves in the intoxicating rhythm of their passion. Pulling back just a fraction to observe her flushed face, Lord Lionel murmurs her name, his eyes dark with overwhelming adoration. Despite the lack of physical pain, a sudden and paralyzing wave of deep-seated fear washes over Chloe's vulnerable heart. Trembling with an existential dread, she feels as though a vital piece of her identity is slowly being stripped away and invaded by this overwhelming intimacy. Gripping the bedsheets with white knuckles, she confesses her terrifying vulnerability, prompting Lord Lionel to softly whisper her name in return. Pulling her shivering form flush against his bare chest, he strokes her hair and promises her that absolutely everything is fine. Showering her with patient, soothing words, he vows that she will be all right, anchoring her spiraling thoughts with his steady presence. Silent, heartbreaking tears spill from the corners of her expressive eyes as she struggles to process the immense weight of her own conflicting emotions. Wiping her tears with a trembling hand, she apologizes profusely for her breakdown, tentatively whispering that she suddenly feels all right again. Swallowed by a profound sense of humiliation, Chloe berates herself for harboring such intense terror over a perfectly natural and common act. Chastising her own perceived weakness, she laments that her previous mental preparations have completely crumbled into pathetic hesitation. Seeing right through her fragile facade, Lord Lionel gently calls her out, noting that she is still desperately trying to act strong even in this intimate moment. Caught entirely off guard by his sharp emotional intuition, Chloe's eyes widen as a breathless gasp catches in her throat. Smiling with a breathtaking amount of empathy, he reassures her that experiencing fear during such a monumental first step is completely natural. Stroking her cheek with endless devotion, he grants her the ultimate permission to drop her guard, inviting her to show her true vulnerability. Gazing up into the ethereal glow of the moonlight, Chloe experiences a profound, life-altering epiphany. Touched to her very core, she realizes that for the first time, someone is unconditionally accepting her flaws, starkly contrasting the strict expectations of her past. Haunted by echoes of her strict upbringing, she recalls the relentless demands to be a flawless, unwavering noble lady worthy of the Marquis-Oldland and the Clay-All family name. Breaking the chains of her suffocating past, this extraordinary man has finally proven to her that carrying weakness is not a tragic flaw. Overwhelmed by absolute relief and unconditional love, a fresh wave of deeply cathartic tears cascades down her beautifully flushed face. Pressing a reverent, lingering kiss to her forehead, Lord Lionel softly speaks her name, checking on her emotional state. Offering him a brave, genuine smile through her receding tears, Chloe softly whispers that she is completely okay now. Taking a bold and proactive step, she wraps her arms around his neck and pleads with a sweet, hungry desperation for him to continue. Leaning in with an incredibly seductive whisper, she asks what comes next, causing Lord Lionel to gasp her name in a sudden rush of shock. Completely overwhelmed by her sudden, intoxicating shift in demeanor, his composure shatters as a heavy blush paints his handsome, deeply aroused face. Staring up at him from the tangled sheets, Chloe tilts her head with an expression of innocent, bewildered curiosity. Locked in an incredibly intense, silent gaze, the burning desire between them ignites into a raging inferno that demands to be quenched. Crushing her against his chest in a desperately passionate embrace, they surrender entirely to the raw, undeniable feeling that consumes them both. Staring through tear-filled eyes, Chloe realizes this horrifying thought cannot be true. She feels an overwhelming, undeniable sensation of being truly loved. Gasping softly, her gorgeous eyes widen as a profound realization strikes her like lightning. The sheer intensity of the moment shatters her previous, crippling doubts. Wrapped tightly in his dominating embrace, she forcefully reminds herself that this cannot be real love. Her mind frantically dismisses his deep affection as nothing more than a beautiful, tragic illusion. Longing for genuine affection, she laments that their marriage is simply a contract of convenience despite his tender touches. The heavy weight of an indescribable pain crushes her heart as she foolishly imagines the happiness of a marriage based on love. Silent tears stream down her beautiful face as the overwhelming emotional conflict peaks. Leaning in closely, his handsome face hardens with an intense emotion. His voice drips with frustration as he calls her name and declares this situation completely unfair. To her absolute shock, He fiercely demands to know who she was secretly thinking about during their intimacy. Completely paralyzed by his intense, unexpected accusation, Chloe's breath catches painfully in her throat. Wide-eyed and trembling, she stares up at him in absolute, unadulterated shock. Gripping her forcefully, Lord Lionel presses down with a sudden, overwhelming dominance that pins her to the bed. Panic flares in her chest as she desperately pleads for him to wait. Grabbing her chin with fierce determination, he commands her to open her eyes and look at him. A startled gasp escapes her lips as his burning, intense gaze locks onto hers. Trapping her completely beneath his muscular frame, he furiously interrogates her about who is currently standing before her. His voice trembles with a potent, explosive mix of anger and desperate longing. Pinning her delicate hand to the mattress, he aggressively demands an immediate, honest answer from her. The raw intensity of his raging jealousy blazes through every single word. Hearing him bark her name, a profound sadness washes over her delicate, flushed features. She stares at him helplessly, entirely overwhelmed by his sudden, explosive fury. Glaring down with unbridled frustration, Lord Lionel fiercely demands to know who her husband is. His powerful chest heaves as he struggles to control his spiraling, violent emotions. Continuing his jealous interrogation, he aggressively asks who is ravishing her in this very moment. Trembling under his heavy weight, she breathlessly stammers that it is Lionel, her husband. He orders her not to close her eyes while they are bound together. He desperately needs her to acknowledge his presence and burn his dominant image into her mind. He demands she look closely at the man claiming her body. He wants to obliterate any other thought from her mind with his fierce, unyielding passion. Golden sunlight spills into the grand bedroom, marking the quiet arrival of the very next morning. A heavy, isolating silence has replaced the chaotic passion of the previous night. Chloe struggles to open her heavy, sleep-crusted eyelids. She groggily attempts to process the hazy, overwhelming memories of her turbulent wedding night. Sitting up alone in the tangled sheets, she realizes with a sinking heart that the grand bed is empty. There is absolutely no trace of Lord Lionel left in the silent, sunlit room. A profound wave of sorrow crashes over her as she absorbs the stinging reality of his cold absence. Tears threaten to spill from her beautiful eyes as the chilling loneliness sets in. Staring blankly at the empty pillows, she feels an overwhelming sense of isolation in her soul. The sudden distance between them feels like a physical blow to her fragile, aching heart. Analyzing his furious words, she realizes he completely misunderstood and thought she desired someone else. Haunted by the echoing memories of their wedding night, his jealous demands replay vividly in her mind. Confusion swirls in her head as she desperately wonders what triggered his intense jealousy. Racking her brain for answers, she silently blames herself for unknowingly doing something wrong to spark his anger. Swallowed by guilt, she tragically accepts that being left alone on her first morning is entirely her own fault. Ironically, she admits she hadn't even thought of Ernest until Lionel forcefully brought up the accusation. Despite the lingering physical ache in her body, she notes the pain is nothing compared to her past suffering. A soft realization blooms in her chest as she credits Lord Lionel for easing her deep-seated trauma. The warm memory of his gentle smile shines brightly in her mind's eye. Reflecting on their engagement, she realizes Ernest never visited whenever she was home. She uncovers the bitter truth that Ernest specifically timed his visits to court her younger sister behind her back. Realizing Lionel's hidden protection, she deduces that her husband subtly warned Ernest to stay away from her. Piecing the puzzle together, she sees that Lord Lionel's frequent visits were a calculated move out of consideration for her. Overwhelmed by his silent chivalry, she realizes he fiercely protected her honor from the crushing humiliation of being discarded for her sister. Her heart swells as she understands his casual touches were gentle distractions designed to soothe her aching heart. Calling him a cruel man, she fondly notes how he playfully provoked her with mentions of her sister to keep her mind occupied. A profound gratitude washes over her as she recognizes the immense care Lord Lionel poured into ensuring she never endured heartache alone. Blushing deeply in the quiet room, she confesses to herself that she has already started falling for him. Gathering her resolve, she decides it is finally time to get up. A sudden pain shoots through her body as she tries to move. Paralyzed by the aftereffects of their passionate night, she realizes her body absolutely refuses to move. Gripping the sheets, an intense and unfamiliar discomfort throbs between her legs. Blinking away the physical discomfort, a sudden sound outside the door catches her attention. The heavy bedroom door swings open to break the morning silence. Peeking into the room, a concerned maid softly asks if her lady is awake. Startled but composed, Chloe quickly confirms she is awake to May. Relieved to see May, Chloe expresses her deep embarrassment at the thought of the Duke's unfamiliar maid seeing her in this vulnerable state. Noticing her immense distress, May quickly asks if her lady is all right, prompting a visibly confused reaction from Chloe. May stares down at her lady with a deeply troubled and worried expression plastered across her face. Gazing upwards, Chloe realizes the gravity of the situation and quietly acknowledges it to herself. Assuring May she is fine, Chloe realizes the maid's worry stems from her late confinement and immediately asks for Lord Lionel's whereabouts. May quickly informs her that Lord Lionel already left for the royal palace early this morning. Chloe softly repeats his destination as she absorbs the sudden news of his completely unexpected departure. May remains utterly silent, her tearful eyes reflecting her deep sympathy for her newlywed lady. Observing May's deeply apologetic expression, Chloe feels her own internal guilt deepen significantly. Realizing he was granted leave, Chloe deduces that his supposed work at the palace serves merely as a convenient excuse to flee. Forcing a painful smile, Chloe desperately rationalizes that he must simply be incredibly busy with his duties. The grave implications of a husband abandoning his new bride on their first morning resonate deeply, a harsh fact even May understands. The grand, towering spires of the royal palace pierce the cloudy morning sky. Arriving at the grand palace, a tense and exhausted Lionel completely interrupts the morning silence. Working diligently at his desk, Riel directly questions why Lionel has suddenly shown up at his office. With a knowing smirk, Riel teasingly remarks that it remains quite harsh to command him to leave right away. Sitting down heavily on the couch, Lionel completely dismisses Riel's expressed pity for Lady Chloe as missing the entire point. Lionel reflects on his long-standing bond with his close childhood companion and cousin Riel, the crown prince of the country. The harsh reality sets in that his new bride has been left completely alone in an unfamiliar place on her very first morning. Staring him down with sheer disappointment, Riel harshly reprimands Lionel by stating he is far better than this. Internally berating himself for his foolish actions, Lionel readily acknowledges he did not need Riel to point out his profound mistakes. After a long night of reflection, Lionel intensely regrets letting his volatile emotions take over and acting so harshly toward her. Disgusted with his own unprecedented behavior, he realizes he acted worse than a mindless animal learning for the absolute first time. He vividly recalls his solemn vow to cherish her with all his heart, admiring how earnestly she responded despite her utter lack of experience. The agonizing memory of seeing her quietly shedding tears flashes violently through his deeply conflicted mind. Driven to the absolute edge by her sheer vulnerability, he fully admits that he completely lost control of himself. He confesses that her unexpected vulnerability caught him severely off guard and sparked an overwhelming excitement, making him fall for her even more deeply. Utterly shocked by his own unprecedented lack of restraint, he fully admits he rushed ahead and barely prepared her before entirely losing his composure. Seeing the usually rational woman completely lose control overwhelmed his masculine pride, granting him an unbearable sense of superiority and deep fulfillment. From the absolute bottom of his beating heart, he finally realizes just how truly precious she has rapidly become to him. Blinded by his own intense passion, he mistakenly believed she felt something remarkably close to genuine love for him as well. However, as he held her tightly in his deeply affectionate embrace, a devastating reality shattered his hopeful delusion. The devastating realization struck him like a physical blow that even in his arms, her mind remained solely focused on thinking about him. Rationalizing the intensely painful truth, he acknowledges that her stubborn loyalty makes it utterly impossible to sever years of deep emotions in just a few short months. In the immediate aftermath of their deeply intimate act, a crushing and intense sense of utter betrayal forcefully consumed his entire being. Having finally calmed down, he bitterly recognizes the profound childishness of his reckless actions, especially considering it was her very first time. Watching her sleep peacefully, he agonizes over what kind of expression he could possibly wear when they must face the morning together. Heavy with unresolved guilt, he sits tensely on the edge of the lavish bed as the early morning light pierces the silent room. Unable to face his own profound shame, he completely abandons the sleeping bride and quietly shuts the heavy bedroom door firmly behind him. Snapping him violently out of his bitter memories, Riel sharply calls out his name across the quiet study. Staring blankly ahead, Lionel quietly confirms that he remains painfully aware of his massive failure. Defensive and utterly exhausted, he bluntly tells his royal cousin that he absolutely does not need to hear further reprimands from him. A heavy silence violently falls as Lionel glares downward with a deeply frustrated and sullen expression etched permanently across his face. Amused by his cousin's incredibly rare emotional turmoil, Riol lets out a soft sigh and forms a highly knowing smirk. Lionel bitterly reflects that the Crown Prince himself remained historically notorious for his extreme stubbornness during his own turbulent engagement. As the kingdom's sole heir, Riol was mercilessly forced into a political marriage with a woman he strongly disliked. Throughout their incredibly tense engagement, the stubborn prince acted completely cold and brutally distant toward his designated fiancée. Despite his incredibly harsh outward facade, it remained glaringly obvious to everyone else that he secretly harbored deep feelings for her all along. The painful memory rapidly surfaces of the tearful fiancée, deeply shattered by the prince's relentless emotional walls. Pushing his sheer cruelty to the absolute limit, the prince even took a lover explicitly to spite his fiercely devoted fiancée. Reaching her absolute breaking point, his devoted fiancée finally had enough of his cruelty and abruptly left him. Only after losing her did the stubborn prince finally swallow his immense pride and openly admit his true feelings. Having successfully reconciled their differences, they quickly became renowned throughout the kingdom as an incredibly loving couple. Remembering how terribly Riol treated his own partner, Lionel bitterly thinks the prince has absolutely no right to lecture him about treating his wife. Riol closely observes his cousin's sullen demeanor from across the quiet study as the tension thickens. Breaking the heavy silence, Riol directly asks if something happened between him and his new bride. A sudden realization visibly dawns on the crown prince's face as he pieces together the timeline of last night's royal wedding. Watching Riol's expression shift drastically, Lionel realizes with utter dread that his clever cousin is quickly catching on. Letting out an awkward sound, Riol hesitates as he approaches the delicate topic of the wedding night. The crown prince awkwardly admits he doesn't quite know what to say about such an intensely private matter. Riol points out the incredibly obvious implication of what typically goes wrong the morning after a royal wedding night. Trying to comfort his distressed cousin, Riol gently suggests that the sheer exhaustion of the wedding ceremony simply caught up to him. While Riol helpfully offers to fetch the royal physician for performance issues, a thoroughly embarrassed Lionel sharply insists that is not the problem. Confused by the sudden denial, Riol presses further and questions what else could possibly be troubling the young groom. Losing his temper completely, Lionel snaps at his cousin and fiercely demands that he drop the humiliating subject entirely. Taken severely aback by Lionel's explosive outburst, Riol falls completely silent and stares in genuine surprise. An awkward tension fills the grand office as the two royal men shuffle their feet in deep and utter discomfort. Shrugging off the intense awkwardness, Riol casually remarks that these unfortunate situations simply happen sometimes. Riol logically points out that a rocky first night is the exact reason Lionel should be firmly staying by Lady Chloe's side right now. Questioning his own logic, the prince wonders aloud if giving the new bride some space might actually be the better approach. Seeing Riol utterly puzzled by the situation, an exhausted Lionel decides he lacks the energy to correct his wild assumptions. Lionel internally admits he fled to the palace specifically because he could not bear the agonizing thought of Chloe still pining for another man. Despite fully knowing their marriage was arranged and loveless, an intense and fiery jealousy relentlessly consumes his entire being. Resting his chin heavily on his hand, the conflicted Duke broods silently over his wildly unpredictable emotions. He stubbornly concludes that no matter how close they are, he could never confess his completely disgraceful behavior to the crown prince. Leaning in with an inquisitive gaze, Riol bluntly asks how the actual experience was for Lionel. The prince gently reminds his sulking cousin that the wedding night was undoubtedly Lady Chloe's very first time. Riol's previously teasing expression melts away entirely into a much more serious and highly contemplative stare. Sensing Lionel made a massive mistake, Riol urges him to open up, but the stubborn Duke immediately refuses. Persistently pressing the issue, the crown prince firmly demands that Lionel explain what exactly went wrong. Suddenly changing his entire tone, Riol sternly commands his cousin to leave the palace and return home immediately. Standing tall over the seated Duke, the crown prince drops all pretense of friendly banter. Delivering a harsh truth, Riol warns Lionel that abandoning Lady Chloe now will only lead to immense and bitter regrets. Drawing from his own painful past, the prince orders him to return immediately and offer his new bride a proper apology. Gripping the armrest tightly, Lionel listens in stunned silence as his cousin's firm words strike a deeply vulnerable nerve. Riol quietly confesses his own lingering regrets, reminding Lionel that he intimately understands the heavy cost of pushing a partner away. The heavy weight of the Crown Prince's honest words forces Lionel to deeply reevaluate his own cowardly retreat. Delivering a final piece of wisdom, Riol bluntly states that clinging to foolish pride will completely destroy his marriage. He firmly emphasizes that the only absolute truth remaining is the undeniable fact that Lionel deeply hurt his new wife. Turning his back to the study door, Riol advises his cousin to figure out what he genuinely values before it is absolutely too late. Hearing such profound advice from a man who nearly ruined his own life with stubbornness strikes Lionel straight to the core. Lionel vividly recalls the haunting look of sheer regret that once plagued his royal cousin's face. Observing the prince's current demeanor, Lionel finally comprehends the massive emotional toll of those past mistakes. Standing resolutely in the grand office, Riol shoots his cousin one final commanding glare. Offering a rare moment of physical comfort, the Crown Prince places a reassuring hand firmly upon Lionel's tense shoulder. A soft and encouraging smile finally breaks across Riol's face as he silently urges his cousin to do the right thing. With his resolve completely renewed, Lionel turns his back on the study and strides purposefully out the grand double doors. The towering white spires of the royal palace gleam brightly under the clearing morning sky. Arriving swiftly back at his grand estate, the imposing architecture of his own home looms largely before him. Handing his heavy coat to the attentive maids, Lionel is formally welcomed back to the estate he so hastily fled. Seeking the lady of the house, an unseen figure inquires about Chloe's whereabouts. Standing with a somber expression, Lionel explains that she isn't feeling well and is resting in her room. Bathed in the quiet light of her grand bedchamber, Chloe lies fast asleep under heavy covers. Having spent the entire day consumed by slumber, Chloe awakens completely bored, noticing that the deep aches and heavy lethargy in her body have finally vanished. Stretching out with a soft sigh, she finds herself oddly compelled to remain lounging in bed for reasons she cannot quite overcome. Hearing the door creak open, the young woman peeks out from her blankets, wondering if it is her maid checking on her. Shock ripples across her face as she bolts upright in bed, letting out a startled gasp upon seeing an unexpected visitor in her private chambers. Reaching out to gently stop her from rising, a sharply dressed Lord Lionel takes a seat beside the bewildered Chloe. Casting his gaze downward with a troubled look, Lionel formally apologizes upon hearing that his young wife was unwell. Confusion clouds Chloe's wide eyes as she stares back, utterly bewildered as to why Lord Lionel would be the one offering her an apology. Without waiting for her to respond, the brooding nobleman rises abruptly from the bedside and begins to walk away toward the door. Refusing to let him leave in such a tense state, an anxious Chloe calls out for him to wait. Pausing mid-step, Lionel turns his head back toward her flushed face, offering a strained, apologetic smile. Gripping her bedsheets, Chloe insists that she is the one who must apologize, deeply convinced that she had done something terrible to provoke his rare, intense anger. Standing near the heavy wooden doors, Lionel points out that she spent the entire morning making excuses to blatantly avoid seeing him. Shifting his weight nervously in his polished shoes, he demands to know the real reason behind her evasive behavior. Still holding the doorframe, he firmly asks why she feels the need to apologize when he is the one at fault. Chloe blinks in absolute bewilderment, her mind reeling as she struggles to comprehend his baffling logic. Returning to her side with a heavy heart, Lionel confesses that even in his fury, he committed a terrible wrong, especially considering it was her very first intimate experience. Sinking into her thoughts, Chloe reflects that while his actions felt a bit rough, they were not overwhelmingly unpleasant for her, leading her to believe he is overestimating his guilt. Deeply affected by his profound confession, she remains completely baffled as to why he considers his passionate behavior to be a terrible misdeed. Blushing furiously, Chloe covers her face, suddenly feeling incredibly embarrassed by the candid turn of their conversation. Realizing that Lionel mistakenly believes she is bedridden solely due to his rough treatment, a determined Chloe decides she must immediately clear up this disastrous misunderstanding. Offering a gentle smile to her anxious husband, she reassures him that he did nothing terrible, firmly taking the blame for upsetting him in the first place. Stunned by her completely unexpected response, Lionel stares blankly, questioning how she could brush it off even though it was her very first time. Clutching her blankets to her chest with trembling hands, A tearful Chloe anxiously asks if he is still harboring anger toward her. Gazing up at him with wide, pleading eyes, she desperately seeks reassurance that his fury has finally subsided. Unable to maintain his serious demeanor any longer, Lionel turns his back and stifles an amused laugh at her innocent distress. Misinterpreting his sudden laughter, a mortified Chloe shrinks back, utterly convinced that her disgraceful presentation has caused him to view her as a shameless woman. Burying her face into her knees, she spirals into self-deprecation, lamenting how truly pathetic she must appear in his eyes. Shattering her spiraling doubts, Lionel suddenly wraps his strong arms around her fragile frame, burying his face into her shoulder as he softly whispers her name. Caught entirely off guard by his sudden, desperate embrace, Chloe gasps in surprise, feeling the frantic beating of his heart against hers. Melting into his warm, protective hold, she realizes that despite her earlier fears, her husband doesn't seem upset with her at all. Holding her close, Lionel gently murmurs into her ear, promising her that she has done absolutely nothing wrong. Pulling back just enough to look at her, he mournfully confesses that seeing her cry the previous night made him believe she was still longing for another man. His voice heavy with sorrow, Lionel admits he married her fully aware that she had not yet forgotten her past love. Tightening his grip on her shoulders, he reveals that the agonizing thought of her thinking of that man while being intimate with him drove him entirely out of his mind. Piecing together his frantic confession, Chloe's breath hitches as a shocking realization about his true feelings dawns upon her. Lowering his head in shame, the mighty lord finally admits his most vulnerable truth, confessing that he was foolish enough to succumb to overwhelming jealousy. Staring at him in utter disbelief, Chloe realizes that his explosive anger was never about her behavior, but entirely fueled by a deep, burning jealousy over Ernest. Tears prick at the corners of her wide eyes as she marvels at the astonishing depth of his affection, never having realized that she mattered so profoundly to him. Gently stroking her cheek, Lionel softly explains that his overwhelming shame over his jealous outburst was the real reason he vanished from her side this morning. Looking deeply into her shimmering eyes, he confesses that he simply did not know how to face her after losing control of his emotions. Pressing his forehead against hers in a gesture of absolute defeat, Lionel admits his greatest terror was that, after everything, she would still choose that man over him. Tightening his hand around her delicate fingers, he begs for her forgiveness, his voice thick with genuine remorse for his foolish actions. Drawing her securely against his chest, the towering nobleman completely surrenders his pride, seeking comfort in the warmth of his young wife. Resting her chin against his sturdy shoulder, Chloe softly calls out his name, overwhelmed by the intense vulnerability he has just laid bare. Closing her eyes as she absorbs the full weight of his confession, she finally speaks up to clarify the tragic misunderstanding about her tears. With quiet conviction, she assures her trembling husband that her sorrowful weeping last night was never actually about her past. Gently breaking the silence, she breathes out the name Ernest, preparing to finally lay the ghosts of her past to rest and heal the deep rift between them. Resting her head against Lionel's chest, Chloe softly declares that Ernest has finally become just a part of her past. Realizing the most beautiful truth is that Lord Lionel is the one who cares for her, she experiences an unprecedented, soaring happiness. Having always felt like the unchosen one, she finally achieves her cherished childhood dream of being truly wanted. Looking up with tearful, joyful eyes, Chloe openly confesses her deep love to her husband. Finding immense comfort by his side, she admits that she has been drawn to him for a long time without even realizing it. She explains that these blooming feelings are entirely different from her past with Ernest, cementing her certainty that this is true love. Gazing tenderly back at her flushed face, Lionel softly returns her confession by declaring his love for her too. Overwhelmed by an indescribable happiness, Chloe leans into his warm embrace. Their hands gently intertwine as she marvels at the unexpected, dizzying joy of having her romantic feelings mutually returned. Smiling softly, she feels completely dizzy with pure, radiant joy. Lionel suddenly clarifies that while she is a very precious existence to him, his feelings might not just be simple love or infatuation. Stunned by this sudden shift, Chloe's eyes widen as she whispers in utter confusion. Her mind races wildly as she desperately tries to comprehend the meaning behind his unexpected words. The towering nobleman continues his enigmatic explanation, stating firmly that it is not mere affection. Seeking clarity, a deeply confused Chloe asks if his feelings completely lack true love and affection. A harsh realization dawns upon her that his definition of, like, merely means he finds her favorable, contrasting painfully with her profound love. Shattering her fragile hopes, she notes the agonizing gap between their identical words is as vast as heaven and earth. Accepting the painful truth, she acknowledges his own admission that his affection does not equate to genuine romantic love. As he promises to cherish her from the bottom of his heart just as they agreed, she silently laments not being a one-of-a-kind existence to him. Burying her face in silent despair, she realizes the hand he extends first is still not choosing her. Heartbreak washes over her fragile frame as she wonders if she must always watch him choose someone else. The crushing, familiar weight of being unchosen strikes her wounded heart once again. Noticing her sudden shift into despair, an anxious Lionel gently calls out her name. Seeing her distress, he urgently asks if she has started crying. Forcing a tearful smile to mask her true pain, she softly denies her sorrow because she cannot afford to let her real feelings show. Pausing briefly, she admits that hearing him say he likes her still brought her a measure of genuine happiness. Chloe reminds herself that she agreed to marry him fully aware that their arrangement completely lacked true romantic love. Understanding that he only vowed to make an effort to love her, she resolves to be content with his fondness so as not to trouble him. Looking up with renewed determination, she requests that they continue to cherish each other simply as a married couple from now on. She assures him with quiet grace that she truly means this from the very bottom of her heart. Lionel gazes down at her with a remarkably sorrowful, pained expression etched across his handsome features. With intense sincerity, he murmurs that he genuinely wants to love her. Touched by his honest effort, Chloe decides that just being liked is more than enough happiness for her current situation. Pulling her close on the bed, Lionel leans in and captures her lips in a tender, passionate kiss. Breaking the sweet kiss, he gently traces her cheek while looking at her with a lingering, affectionate intensity. Basking in his lingering warmth, Chloe closes her eyes and smiles with a peaceful, loving resignation. Transitioning to a grand estate, the narrative notes that the first 6 months of their marriage flew by in a rapid rush. Sitting behind an imposing desk, Lord Lionel conducts serious administrative business with his gathered subordinates. Surging forward like an unstoppable storm, Lord Lionel officially inherited his noble title immediately after their honeymoon. Despite her childhood experience managing her late mother's household, Chloe finds her new responsibilities incredibly daunting. Overwhelmed by the massive scale difference between accounts and a duke's family, an exhausted Chloe rubs her throbbing forehead. Intercepting her moment of exhaustion, a gentle voice suddenly calls out her name through the slightly open wooden doors. Poking her head into the room, a warm, smiling woman makes a cheerful and highly welcome appearance. Her kind mother-in-law suggests taking a little break, warmly noting that Chloe must be incredibly tired. A beautifully prepared tea set and a vase of elegant roses await them for their relaxing afternoon break. Pouring the tea, the mother-in-law expresses her profound happiness that Chloe married into their family, noting her husband's constant praise. Beaming with genuine maternal affection, she admits she has always desperately wanted a daughter as cute as Chloe. Smiling warmly together, the two women share a light, joyful chuckle in comforting familial camaraderie. Deeply grateful, Chloe reflects that she survived these 6 months entirely thanks to the warm, daughter-like treatment from her mother-in-law and brother-in-law. Bursting onto the scene, her energetic brother-in-law happily presents a beautiful flower he found blooming in the sunny courtyard. Delighting in the innocent affection of young Clovis, Lady Ceceriel graciously accepts a flower meant for his sister-in-law, confirming the boy's fondness for Lady Chloe. Observing the tender family dynamic, she notes how charming the exceptionally young brother truly is. Basking in the boy's enthusiastic promise to gift another flower to his mother, Ceceriel reflects on the unbelievable kindness radiating from the Duke's entire family. She realizes Lord Lionel only ever departed without warning once during their early days, choosing instead to faithfully spend every single morning and evening by her side even after half a year. Gazing at the towering grandfather clock, she acknowledges the heavy burdens of his work. Hearing the door finally open, she feels a wave of relief wash over her knowing he always returns home properly at night despite the late hour. Lord Lionel enters the room with a soft, affectionate gaze directed entirely at his wife. Melting into his welcoming kiss, she firmly concludes that her perfect husband truly cherishes her, leaving absolutely no suspicion that he might be out playing elsewhere. Feeling the warmth of his hold, she reassures herself that their arranged marriage is certainly not devoid of love. Ceciriel decides that demanding anything more from her comfortable life would be greedy, viewing the actual presence or absence of deep romantic love as a merely trivial matter. Embracing her current reality, she finds her bustling life within the Duke's prominent family to be incredibly warm and fulfilling. Watching the cheerful interactions between her new family members amidst the blooming roses, a profound sense of genuine happiness washes over her. Preparing for an upcoming royal event, Ceciriel timidly admits to her maids that she feels a little nervous. Gently adjusting her elegant dress, her attendant advises Duchess Ceciriel to relax her tense shoulders since this is hardly her first time undertaking such official duties. Ceciriel confesses her lingering hesitation at being addressed as the Duchess despite spending the past 6 months attending events as a couple, especially concerning tonight's gathering. Discussing the royal attendees, the maids note that the Crown Princess's previously fragile health has stabilized, allowing her to attend tonight's function for the first time in quite a while. Checking her flawless reflection in the ornate mirror, Ceciriel registers that the royal palace hosted a grand ball just last night. Gazing out toward the majestic spires of the royal castle, she mentally braces herself for their very first formal public presentation as a couple to the Crown Prince and Princess. She realizes she has never actually met Her Highness the Princess due to her prolonged illness, despite crossing paths with His Highness the Prince in various public and private settings since he and Lord Lionel are cousins. Steeling her nerves, Ceciriel prepares to face whatever the night may bring. Exhaling softly, she sincerely expresses her gladness that the princess's health has finally returned to a normal state. A sudden shadow of doubt falls across Ceciriel's wide eyes as she processes the underlying context of her husband's earlier words. Clenching her delicate dress in rising anxiety, she questions why Lionel speaks of the princess so often, especially since she has never once heard of his relationship with the princess being particularly good despite his well-known closeness to his cousin the Crown Prince. While acknowledging her own genuine concern for Her Highness's health, a chilling suspicion paralyzes Ceciriel as she wonders if there is more to her husband's worry than simple courtesy. Desperately trying to clear her clouded mind, she vigorously shakes her elegant head to dispel the encroaching paranoid thoughts. She reminds herself that since Lord Lionel has been connected to the Crown Prince since childhood, it wouldn't be surprising if he shared a similarly long-standing bond with the princess due to their arranged marriage. Glancing beside her, she observes Lord Lionel's composed and handsome profile as they stand together. Desperately clinging to her logical deduction, Ceciriel tries to convince herself that her innocent assumption must surely be the truth. The grand ballroom doors swing open, allowing Lord Lionel and a stunningly dressed Ceciriel to make their majestic, rustling entrance before the assembled nobility. Descending the sweeping staircase with perfect poise, the striking couple confidently approaches the elevated dais where the Crown Prince and Princess await. Bowing with utmost grace, Ceciriel thanks the royal couple for the invitation, declaring it her greatest happiness to finally have the honor of a formal audience with their highnesses. A gentle, authoritative voice breaks the formal tension, kindly instructing Lady Ceciriel to lift her bowed head. Ceciriel is met with the breathtakingly warm smile of the Crown Princess, who warmly admits she has already heard much about her from His Highness and insists there is no need to be so rigidly formal. Stepping forward to affectionately grasp Ceciriel's hands, the princess joyfully expresses her desire for them to get along well since they are both the exact same age. The Crown Princess radiates an incredibly gentle and welcoming aura, her soft laughter completely disarming the tense atmosphere. Utterly captivated by the royal's unexpected warmth, Ceciriel's anxious expression immediately softens into one of wide-eyed awe. Bowing her head slightly in deep gratitude, Ceciriel humbly thanks the princess for directing such incredibly generous words towards someone of her modest standing. Smiling brightly, the Crown Princess assures Ceciriel that she has been completely fine recently before politely inquiring about Ceciriel's own health. The princess playfully adds that His Highness insists on remaining overly cautious about her well-being just in case. Observing the Crown Prince lean in close to his wife, Ceciriel witnesses a private, deeply affectionate exchange between the royal couple. Noting the undeniably warm atmosphere enveloping the pair, Ceciriel silently marvels at how incredibly well the royal couple gets along. A genuine smile finally graces Ceciriel's face as all her previous dark suspicions about the princess melt away in the light of such obvious marital bliss. Beside her, Lord Lionel watches the royal couple with an exceptionally soft, almost nostalgic smile playing on his lips. Catching sight of her husband's tender expression, Ceciriel's breath hitches as a complex wave of new realization strikes her. Maintaining her flawless aristocratic composure, Cicerielle smoothly states how truly relieved she is to hear that Her Highness's health remains in such a good state. The royal couple graciously extends their thanks to Lord Lionel as well, asking him to continue taking excellent care of His Highness moving forward. The Crown Prince jokingly dismisses the need for a lousy protection charm, prompting Lionel to confidently declare that the prince's protection should be left entirely to him. Hearing their familiar, friendly banter, Cicerielle recognizes this relaxed demeanor as the usual Lord Lionel she has come to know. However, a persistent bead of sweat drops down her neck as her heart violently clenches at a sudden, terrifying epiphany. Haunted by the lingering memory of her husband's face, she chillingly realizes that the brief, intensely emotional expression he showed earlier was hiding something far deeper. Gasping in shock, she abruptly stops her dark train of thought, feeling as if an invisible weight has just dropped on her. A cold sweat breaks out on her pale face as she stands frozen in the bustling hall, her wide eyes reflecting a sudden surge of internal panic. Desperately trying to rationalize her fears, she scolds herself for letting nervousness make her overly sensitive to the smallest details, blaming her bad habit of overthinking. Masking her inner turmoil, she manages a bright smile as she walks arm in arm with her handsome husband through the grand, festive hall. Despite her attempts to appear completely calm, a subtle tension lingers in her graceful posture while Lord Lionel remains effortlessly composed beside her. The festive atmosphere is suddenly disrupted as someone brushes past them, causing a momentary shift in the couple's steady stride. A sudden, heavy seriousness falls over Lord Lionel's handsome face as his previously gentle smile vanishes without a trace. Catching the abrupt shift in her husband's demeanor, her eyes widen in renewed anxiety as all her lingering doubts violently rush back in. Quiet murmurs ripple through the crowd as a subtle touch causes someone to slip away from her side. Fingers lightly brush against fabric in a fleeting moment of contact, signaling an impending and sudden separation. Lord Lionel abruptly excuses himself, apologizing as he announces his intention to step away to the cigar room for a while. Left standing alone in the massive ballroom, she murmurs a quiet acknowledgement as a deep sense of isolation washes over her. Watching his retreating back, a crushing realization hits her that an invisible but undeniable wall has just slammed down between them. The chilling distance between them solidifies instantly, leaving her completely isolated in the middle of the crowded venue. Reflecting on their half-year of marriage, she realizes that she knows him well enough to silently perceive every subtle shift in his emotions without him saying a word. A sickening wave of dread washes over her as she confirms that the nagging discomfort and gut feeling she experienced earlier were absolutely correct. Startled by a familiar voice calling out to her, Chloe turns her head while still agonizing over what Lord Lionel's strange behavior truly means. Caught in a whirlwind of emotional turmoil, she violently braces herself as a figure from her past unexpectedly materializes before her. Her heart skips a beat as she comes face to face with Lord Ernest, sparking a shocking and tense reunion with her former fiancé. Meanwhile, hidden away in the cigar room, Lord Lionel is haunted by the ghosts of an old love and feelings deeply rooted in past admiration. His handsome features are hardened by a deep, melancholic reflection as he mentally confronts the heavy burden of his own hidden history. The image of Chloe's bright, genuine smile flashes through his mind, standing in stark, beautiful contrast to the dark emotions swirling within him. He bitterly acknowledges the envy, jealousy, and profoundly ugly emotions that he has kept buried deep within his heart for so long. Recalling her wide, perceptive gaze, he knows that his intelligent wife has already sensed the darkness he desperately tried to hide. A heavy wave of guilt crashes over him as he admits to himself that Chloe has undoubtedly realized the painful truth of his emotional shift. Sitting alone at the bar, he realizes with absolute certainty that his abrupt withdrawal has plunged her into deep, quiet pain. He reflects that their 6 months of marriage have intimately attuned him to her heart, allowing him to easily read every subtle change in her emotions. Gripping his glass tightly, he accepts the double-edged sword of their bond, knowing that she can read his shifting emotions just as clearly as he reads hers. He mentally kicks himself, fully aware that his panicked retreat from the ballroom made her feel utterly and cruelly rejected in that vulnerable moment. Fueled by a sudden, desperate resolve, he decides that he must return to her side immediately to fix the massive emotional damage he just caused. Having finally calmed his confused mind, he refuses to leave her wounded by his unconscious avoidance and vows to speak to her with absolute honesty. He determines to assure her that while traces of his past love remain as mere memories, His overwhelming feelings for Chloe now completely eclipse them, leaving absolutely no room for guilt. He passionately acknowledges that Chloe is the only person who successfully dragged him out of the hopeless, suffocating whirlpool of his past emotions. A profound sense of clarity washes over him as he admits he has fundamentally known the truth of his absolute devotion to her for a very long time. He intensely contemplates the massive depth and undeniable warmth of the feelings he currently harbors for his beloved wife. His determination hardens as he prepares to completely discard the lingering shadows of his former life and sprint back to her. He realizes that he foolishly shackled himself to a dead past because moving on felt like betraying his former self, leaving him entirely unable to express his true present feelings. However, seeing his former love today finally shattered the illusion entirely, making him clearly realize that the past is absolutely nothing more than the past. Furious with himself, he acknowledges how he pathetically drowned in momentary sorrow and foolishly deluded himself into thinking his perceptive wife wouldn't notice his turmoil. Downing his drink, he admits that having his lingering, complicated emotions suddenly exposed left him feeling utterly and completely confused. Slamming his glass down on the counter with explosive force, he throws on his coat and decisively storms out of the cigar room to find her. Back in the grand hall, a tense atmosphere suffocates the space as Lord Ernest and Chloe stand face to face, speaking each other's names. Noticing her terrible complexion, Ernest expresses his deep concern over how pale she looks, though she quickly and defensively insists that she is perfectly fine. When Ernest pries about Lord Lionel's whereabouts, Chloe coldly dismisses his concern, sharply noting that engaging with her former fiancé in public is completely inappropriate. Maintaining her icy composure, she politely but firmly directs Ernest to the cigar room if he truly wishes to speak with her husband. Ernest stares back in stunned silence, clearly caught off guard by the impenetrable, frigid wall she has masterfully erected between them. Her sharp, unwavering gaze locks onto his, completely devoid of the affection she once held and radiating pure, aristocratic strength. Shattered by her fiercely independent demeanor, Ernest quietly and mournfully observes just how much she has changed since they were last together. Unfazed by his melancholic observation, Chloe smoothly and unapologetically acknowledges her transformation without a single ounce of regret. A heavy, definitive silence settles between the former lovers, cementing the absolute finality of their severed past as she courageously stands her ground. A subtle breath sets the stage for a shifting dynamic. Reflecting on their reunion, Chloe acknowledges an undeniable internal shift within herself while noting that Ernest remains exactly as he ever was. Ernest gazes back silently, his expression carrying a quiet and familiar weight. Smiling politely, she confirms his assumption that things are going perfectly well between her and her current partner. Stepping out of bounds, Ernest admits he has no right to speak yet hesitates on the precipice of a confession. A soft, melancholic smile unexpectedly crosses his delicate features. Swallowing his lingering pride, he earnestly wishes her genuine happiness. Struck completely off guard, Chloe stands frozen as the weight of his heartfelt blessing washes over her. Recognizing the pure sincerity in his voice, she laments that his kind words arrive at the absolute worst possible moment. His blessing strikes a painful chord, especially after she recently discovered that Lionel has rejected the one he truly loves. Adding deep insult to her hidden injury, Ernest's sudden arrival and well wishes only deepen her overwhelming internal turmoil. Noticing her sudden distress, a concerned voice urgently calls out her name. He gently asks if she is all right as her polite composure rapidly begins to crack. Stepping decisively into the fray, her lighter-haired partner wraps a secure, protective arm around her shoulders with a confident rustle. Flashing a fiercely charismatic smile, the Duke greets Ernest and boldly notes how long it has been since their last encounter. The tension instantly skyrockets as the Duke brazenly asserts his overwhelming presence over the former fiancée. Whispers erupt among the gathering crowd as bystanders note Ernest's solitary arrival, confirming rampant rumors that he kept the truth from Chloe out of respect for her family. The gossiping nobility loudly deduce that the newly minted engagement between the Marquis of Oldland's son and the Clayall family's younger sister is rapidly falling apart. Observers cruelly whisper that the Count of Clayall is actively dodging the issue, as over half a year has passed with zero progress on a wedding date due to the sisters' persistent hesitation. Analyzing the situation, the Duke deduces that Ernest's new fiancée is crippled by an overblown pride and agonizing frustration over constantly being compared to the exceptional Chloe. High society has already branded the foolish sister as shameless for stealing her older sibling's fiancé, leading her to heavily regret the arrangement and prompting Ernest to desperately seek Chloe's advice. The Duke internally seethes, viewing Ernest's sheer audacity to seek advice from the very woman he abandoned as an act of absolute, unforgivable insolence. Simmering with fierce protectiveness, he silently vows that any distress caused to Chloe by this encounter will ignite his boundless rage. A sharp, intense glint flashes in the Duke's eye as he coldly assesses the man standing before them. Seeking immediate refuge, Chloe leans her head softly against the Duke's chest, allowing his warmth to anchor her. She casts a breathtakingly gentle smile upward, fully embracing her supportive role at his side. Caught entirely off guard by her genuine warmth, the Duke's stern expression softens instantly. Ernest watches the intimate display, his face completely shattering into an expression of devastated shock. Though fully aware their relationship is under constant public scrutiny and meant to be a superficial show, the Duke struggles to maintain his own composure amidst the whispering crowd. Her seemingly affectionate gestures manage to completely bypass his heavily guarded emotional defenses. Staring at Ernest's clueless face, the Duke realizes that even these fleeting, performative moments make him feel intensely elated. Pulling her closer, he mentally confesses that he has completely fallen under her intoxicating spell. Breaking the stunned silence, he addresses Ernest to emphasize the vast, insurmountable distance that has grown between them. Their hands intertwine firmly, projecting an absolutely unbreakable united front against the former fiancé. Overwhelmed by the Duke's flawless emotional rescue, Chloe fights back a tear while thinking how utterly unfair his kindness feels. She internally pleads that if he truly intends to push her away eventually, he should do it completely and without any hesitation. Yet, just before she completely breaks down, he somehow always finds a miraculous way to support her. She knows that when he protects her so fiercely, it is only natural for her fragile emotions to waver. Desperately reminding herself that their reactions are being closely observed, she fights to control her rising tears. Regaining her elegant composure, she softly apologizes for her momentary weakness. Pressing delicately against his arm, she elegantly excuses her stumble by claiming she felt a bit dizzy. Playing his part perfectly, the Duke feigns deep concern, scolding her for pushing herself too hard and asking if she is all right. Reassuring him that she is fine now, she graciously accepts his gentle reminder that her health is the absolute most important thing. Capitalizing on the excuse, the Duke swiftly cuts the conversation short, telling Lord Ernest they must end things here for the day. Without leaving any room for argument, he firmly declares that they will take their leave. Pausing just before departing, the Duke prepares to deliver one final, piercing remark. Smiling viciously over his shoulder, he deals a crushing blow by telling a devastated Ernest to convey his regards to his fiancée. Turning their backs on the shattered man, their synchronized footsteps echo sharply down the grand hallway. Walking until they are completely out of the crowd's sight, the oppressive tension finally begins to lift. Safe from prying eyes, a nervous Chloe quietly questions how much longer they are going to stay locked in this intimate embrace. Noticing his silence, Chloe gazes up and softly calls out to Lord Lionel. Knowing Lord Lionel never favored Lord Ernest, she wonders if he simply stopped showing his jealousy openly after that fateful first night she provoked his anger. Staring up at his stoic profile, she gently asks if he is angry right now. Caught completely off guard by her direct question, Lionel falls into a heavy, stunned silence. Waiting anxiously for an honest answer, Chloe maintains her steady, questioning gaze. Narrowing his eyes with a subtle shift in demeanor, he firmly denies being angry. Continuing their walk down the grand corridor, he reassures her but hesitates as he brings up the earlier encounter. Pressing for details, he asks what exactly happened and whether that man dared to say something specific to her. Casting his gaze downward with a conflicted expression, he admits his honest feelings about the situation. Stepping silently beside him, she expresses her deep gratitude that Lord Lionel came to her rescue. She reflects on how he always supports her when she is on the verge of collapsing, bringing her the greatest comfort by reminding her she does not have to bear everything alone. Accepting her place in his heart, she silently vows that it is perfectly fine even if she is not the primary person he chose in his life. Turning there by noticing her deep silence as they walk through the opulent halls, he gently calls out her name. Breaking her silence, she acknowledges that all of this must have been incredibly difficult for him as well. Gripping her dress tightly, she urges him not to worry because she completely understands his hidden struggles. She deduces that his shared pain is the exact reason why he has always been so exceptionally generous and kind to her. Believing his true feelings for another woman will never be realized or allowed, she hopes he finds no reason to worry or feel sad. She laments the immeasurable cruelty of the pain he has endured for years, silently hiding his heart while watching the one he loves helplessly. Standing side by side, she realizes they both carry the heavy burden of impossible feelings for people entirely beyond their reach. She believes they chose to stay together to ease that mutual pain, existing as two solitary souls bound by a shared sorrow. Closing her eyes against the bitter truth, she acknowledges a tragic complication in their arrangement. To her own quiet devastation, she was the only one who actually ended up falling in love through their fake connection. Knowing this would be completely unexpected for him, she fears that suddenly confessing her love would only bring him unwanted confusion. She firmly believes this is exactly why he repeatedly warned her from the start that there is absolutely no room for love between them. Gathering her fragmented resolve, she softly calls out his name one more time. Flashing a beautifully resigned smile, she vows to perfectly fulfill her role as Duchess without ever demanding more than what they currently share. Struck completely speechless by her flawless boundary setting, Lionel can only let out a soft breath of surprise. CK's on the difficult conversation, the two continue walking down the corridor wrapped in a thick, complicated silence. Later, sinking deeply into a plush armchair, Lionel releases an exhausted, heavy sigh. A voice immediately cuts through the quiet room, sharply demanding to know why he is sighing so miserably. Slapping a hand over the disguised crown prince of Renriel's mouth, Lionel coldly orders Riel to keep his name completely out of this. Settling back into his chair, the disguised prince casually presses his friend to reveal what is bothering him. Maintaining his fiercely guarded demeanor, Lionel stubbornly insists that absolutely nothing is wrong. Refusing to accept the obvious lie, Riel stares his stubborn friend down with a piercing, knowing gaze. Hitting the exact nerve, Riel bluntly asks if the problem concerns Lady Chloe, causing Lionel to violently flinch over his teacup. Reluctantly yielding, Lionel admits it might, but defensively states that he believes his relationship with Chloe is perfectly fine for now. He praises her for fulfilling her role as the Duchess flawlessly, noting her dedication actually far exceeds his expectations. However, he confesses that a maddening lack of harmony makes everything between them feel entirely out of sync. Shifting the focus, he brings up the rampant rumors that her sister's stolen engagement is rapidly falling apart. High society has clearly noticed the severe strain, as the so-called happy couple hasn't been seen together at events for quite some time. Knowing this scandalous news has already reached Chloe, he understands why she chooses to silently observe from a safe distance rather than risk interfering. He grimly notes that her massive sacrifice was completely in vain, suspecting her lingering feelings for that man absolutely haven't faded. A dark shadow crosses his face as he admits his deepest fear that she is finally starting to regret their marriage. While he knows she holds genuine affection for him, the agonizing fact remains that they are still emotionally distant even after 6 months. He brutally analyzes her earlier declaration that things were over with Ernest, convinced it was merely a desperate attempt to hide her true, lingering feelings. The memory burns him as he recalls watching her give that wretched man a breathtakingly genuine smile she never once showed him. To make matters worse, whenever he attempts to confess his love, she deliberately walls him off with a tragic, heartbreaking smile. Crushed by his own terrifying assumptions, he concludes that her fiercely guarded heart undoubtedly still belongs to her former fiancé. Trapped in a prison of his own making, he remembers that he was the foolish one who promised never to ask for more than her duty as a wife. Stripped of all his defenses, he finally admits the agonizing truth that as time passed, he helplessly and completely fell in love with her. Questioned about his marriage to Lady Chloe, a brooding male character is pressed on whether things are truly failing between them. He admits that while they lack children, Chloe flawlessly executes her duties as a wife far beyond what is necessary. Brushing off the concern, he firmly declares that worrying about an heir is entirely premature after a mere 6 months of marriage. Despite claiming everything is fine, he confesses an agonizing inability to shake the strange feeling that a vital piece of their relationship is missing. His companion probes deeper into this lingering doubt with a single, skeptical question. He bitterly curses his own foolishness, realizing he cannot demand more from Chloe after the cold, transactional agreement they made at the beginning. A silent, desperate realization strikes his heart as he admits he yearns for Chloe to genuinely love him. Dismissing his own desire as an impossible request, Lord Lionel steps outside only to be ambushed by a sudden, piercing shriek. A beautiful, trembling blonde girl gasps his name with tear-filled eyes and a flushed face. Lionel freezes in sheer disbelief as he instantly recognizes the Count's daughter, Lady Chloe, standing before him. The girl clutches her hands together and stares up at him pleadingly outside the grand stone steps. Startled and immediately suspicious, he demands to know if she had been lurking in the shadows just waiting to ambush him. Blushing furiously, she stammers out a pathetic excuse, claiming she merely wanted to talk to him for a brief moment. Stepping forward with cold authority, Lionel internally mocks the sheer irony of referring to this manipulative girl as the Count's daughter. Fidgeting nervously under his harsh gaze, she attempts to justify her sudden, uninvited presence. Meeting his intense stare, she dramatically confesses that she came to speak about her elder sister. Lionel glares down at her, deeply annoyed by her presence but begrudgingly acknowledging her terrifying ability to exploit her own pathetic innocence to the absolute fullest. Playing the victim, she sorrowfully laments that her elder sister has completely ignored the mountain of letters she has desperately sent. Weeping shimmering tears, she agonizingly questions if Chloe has finally come to despise her. Lionel narrows his sharp, analytical eyes, seeing right through her carefully constructed facade of sisterly affection. His mind flashes back to the towering stack of wax-sealed envelopes Chloe had recently received from this very same toxic sibling. He remembers a beautiful, long-haired Chloe turning in the grand library, startled by the mention of letters from her estranged sister. In that memory, Lionel confidently steps forward and suggests that he should screen her incoming correspondence first to ensure her safety. He firmly declares he will evaluate the contents and decide whether they are truly worth sharing with her. Looking into Chloe's vulnerable eyes, he admits his fierce desire to shield her from suffering any more abuse at the hands of her ruthless relatives. Offering her an out, he gently acknowledges that he is overstepping his bounds and promises to back down if his interference bothers her. Sitting closely beside his beloved wife on a luxurious couch, he waits patiently for her verdict on his protective proposal. To his immense relief, Chloe smiles resolutely and immediately agrees to his plan, entrusting him with her absolute protection. He realizes her swift compliance stems not just from her profound trust in him, but from a desperate, burning desire to sever all connections with those wretched people. Fully aware of her own tragic tendency to seek out the family that ruthlessly sacrificed her for this younger sister's happiness before discarding her, Chloe willingly handed him the reins of her defense. Snapping back to the present with a scowl, Lionel holds a letter in his mind, absolutely certain that intercepting them was the correct decision. He sneers at the memory of her pathetic, laughable words, begging Chloe to listen because she felt lonely. Furious at the younger sister's sheer audacity to manipulate the very woman she helped destroy, he had resolved to burn the letters and ban her from the estate completely. Staring at the tearful girl standing before him, his blood boils as he realizes she has acted exactly as his darkest predictions dictated. The younger sister continues her calculated assault, clutching her hands to her chest and pleading desperately with Lord Lionel. Dropping all pretense, she aggressively demands immediate access to the elder sister she so casually ruined. Meanwhile, a sharp knock echoes through the estate, shattering the silence outside a grand, ornate door. A calm, authoritative voice from within immediately grants the knocker permission to enter. A deeply hesitant servant nervously pushes open the heavy wooden doors, calling out to the lady of the house. Sitting elegantly in the library, Chloe turns her piercing gaze toward the servant and demands to know the cause of the interruption. The servant trembles as he announces that the son of Marquis Oldland has arrived and violently demands an audience with Lord Lionel. Shock ripples across Chloe's refined features as she gasps Ernest's name in utter disbelief. Reading the deep grimace on the servant's face, she instantly deduces that he would have preferred to hide this catastrophic visit entirely. Her brilliant mind races, realizing Ernest must be cornered by an insurmountable crisis if he is forced to rely on her household. Recalling her sister's arrogant assumption that she never loved Lord Ernest, Chloe reflects on the eerie, unbroken 6-month silence since her wedding. She sharply concludes that her sister's complete lack of contact proves an absolute absence of guilt regarding her past betrayals. Watching a candle burn, the truth blazes in Chloe's mind as she realizes her sister definitely sent letters, but Lord Lionel systematically destroyed them before they could reach her. She understands her fiercely protective husband deemed the contents entirely unacceptable, proving her toxic sister is now trapped in a massive, inescapable problem. A cold smile hints at her lips as she easily imagines the exact, disastrous nature of the crisis currently crushing her arrogant sister. With graceful, unrelenting determination, Chloe pushes back her chair and stands up to face the storm head-on. Stepping into the elegant study, Chloe turns to her composed butler and asks where Lord Lionel has gone for the day. The butler calmly replies that Lord Lionel is accompanying Lord Riol, an alias known only to a trusted few that signifies the disguised prince. Her sharp mind instantly deduces that the unexpected guest remaining at the estate despite her husband's absence signals a severely urgent matter. Taking immediate command, she instructs her loyal servant to guide the guest to the reception room and prepare her formal attire for going out. With a swift, decisive motion, Chloe opens the heavy doors and coldly gazes upon her deeply unsettled former fiancé sitting in the lounge. Startled by her sudden arrival, Ernest leaps from his seat and desperately calls out Chloe's name in sheer panic. As the butler gracefully excuses himself, Ernest anxiously blurts out that he has something incredibly important to discuss with her. Trembling under her composed stare, he covers his mouth in a frantic attempt to gather his crumbling composure. Struggling to maintain his dignity, he stammers out a pathetic apology for his sudden and frantic outburst. Unmoved by his pathetic display, Chloe merely watches him with an agonizingly silent and perfectly composed smile. Sweating nervously, he deeply bows his head and begs Lady Cecerial to forgive his profoundly rude and hasty behavior. Offering him absolutely no comfort, she flashes a dangerously polite smile and simply commands him to take a seat. Gripping his knees in despair, Ernest shockingly reveals that Emily has completely vanished and desperately hoped she had sought refuge here. Without missing a beat, Chloe silently slides a firmly sealed envelope across the polished wooden table. Staring at the frantic scrawl on the parchment, she instantly recognizes the familiar handwriting belonging to her manipulative younger sister. A sudden realization clicks into place as she definitively confirms that Lord Lionel had been ruthlessly intercepting Emily's letters the entire time. Ernest anxiously theorizes that an increasingly desperate Emily must have bypassed all channels to directly confront the Duke himself. Reading between the lines of the desperate letter, Chloe easily deduces that her fiercely protective husband had ruthlessly turned Emily away every single time. Pacing like a cornered animal, Ernest frantically explains that Emily vanished alongside her personal maid and guard, deepening his agonizing dread. Chloe closely analyzes the typically serious man standing before her, noting how completely unhinged and terrified he looks over Emily's safety. Sipping her tea with icy detachment, she casually dismisses his panic and bluntly states that his missing fiancé is none of her concern. Ernest recoils in utter disbelief, violently demanding to know how she could possibly be so indifferent to her own sister's sudden disappearance. Setting her porcelain cup down with a soft clink, Chloe calmly reminds the hysterical man that Emily is perfectly safe with her armed escort. She logically points out that if Emily truly went to ambush Lord Lionel, there is absolutely zero reason to fear for her physical safety. Her sharp eyes narrow as she pieces together that Ernest's suffocating panic stems from a much deeper, far more pathetic insecurity than simple concern. Staring into his erratic eyes, the brilliant Duchess realizes his chaotic behavior is driven by something entirely different than fear. A wave of quiet astonishment washes over her as she fully grasps the sheer depth of Ernest's irrational, consuming jealousy toward her powerful husband. Reflecting on the agonizing heartbreak this man once caused her, Chloe realizes with absolute clarity that looking at his pathetic face now makes her feel absolutely nothing. The final remnants of her tragic past dissolve completely as she firmly confirms that this cowardly man holds zero place in her heart. Flashing a genuinely radiant smile, Chloe confidently declares her absolute trust in Lord Lionel's ability to handle the ridiculous situation perfectly. Desperate to regain her attention, Ernest pathetically calls out her name as she elegantly prepares to dismiss him. Utterly crushed by the weight of his own disastrous choices, Ernest slumps onto the luxurious sofa and shamefully buries his face in his trembling hands. Despite the towering wall of apathy she built against them, a tiny, annoying sliver of her familial instinct still whispers a faint worry for her sister. Rising gracefully to her feet, Chloe nonchalantly suggests they travel together, framing it as a convenient excuse to finally check on the troublesome girl. Thrilled by this unexpected lifeline, Ernest violently snaps his head up and leaps to his feet in eager, desperate agreement. Shrinking under the head butler's terrifyingly cold glare, Ernest awkwardly clears his throat and stammers out his pathetic gratitude. Chloe closes her eyes with serene composure, her brilliant mind already preparing for the inevitable clash waiting at their destination. Turning her back on the pathetic man, she internally resolves that showing them a little calculated cruelty is entirely justified after the hell they put her through. The grand wheels of the Ceceriel carriage rattle intensely across the dirt road as they rapidly depart the luxurious estate. Sitting tensely inside the rocking carriage, a sweating Ernest nervously pries to see if Lord Lionel had shared any vital information with her. Keeping her gaze strictly averted, Chloe smoothly lies that her husband never mentioned her sister, though her sharp mind races with the hidden truth. She mentally analyzes the devastating social fallout, knowing perfectly well that the scandalous rumors about Emily and Ernest have entirely consumed high society. Chloe recalls the vicious aristocratic whispers tearing Emily apart for ruthlessly stealing her elder sister's fiancé only to totally botch the actual engagement. Staring coldly out the carriage window, she brutally concludes that if they cannot handle the societal backlash of their own treacherous choices, they are entirely unfit to rule a marquisate. A surge of profound affection warms her chest as she realizes Lord Lionel systematically blocked the letters to shield her from their toxic, self-inflicted drama. Glancing at the utterly defeated man sitting across from her, the glaring difference between her fiercely devoted husband and this pathetic coward becomes undeniably clear. Her sharp, calculating eyes lock onto Ernest's trembling form, effortlessly reading the pathetic insecurities spiraling wildly out of control within his mind. She expertly dissects his panicked demeanor, realizing with sheer amusement that he is agonizingly comparing his own failures to Lord Lionel's absolute perfection. Mentally placing the flawless, dutiful Duke beside the reckless, impulsive coward who abandoned her, Chloe knows society has already decisively judged who the superior man truly is. Pathetic truth finally clicks in Chloe's brilliant mind as she realizes Ernest is paralyzed by the terrifying fear that Emily is actively trying to abandon him for the infinitely superior Lord Lionel. Chloe calmly informs Ernest that Emily intends to break off her engagement because her parents no longer look at her with favor. Reflecting on her own strict upbringing to become the future Marchioness, Chloe wonders how her sister, who grew up freely without restrictions, could ever adapt to such responsibilities. Finding no refuge at home or in society and constantly compared to Chloe, Emily found the Marquis's strictness overwhelming, increasing her desire to annul the engagement despite her father's refusal to break ties over whims. Staring coldly ahead, Chloe tells Lord Ernest that he must have realized from the start that things would turn out this way and that there was no escaping it. Chloe sternly reminds Ernest that as her future husband, he should have supported and guided Emily, noting that Emily's willingness to face the consequences of breaking the engagement proves he failed to provide the security she needed. Bowing his head in undeniable guilt, Ernest apologizes for always troubling her. Deciding to take matters into her own hands, Chloe states she will speak to Emily herself, believing it best for a third party to intervene now that things have reached this point. Overwhelmed with relief, Ernest emotionally expresses his deep gratitude to Chloe. Ernest informs Chloe that Duke Lionel left just a little while ago. Realizing they missed their chance to see him, Ernest speculates that Lionel likely met with Emily, as he was seen arguing with someone as he departed. Anxious for a lead, Ernest asks Chloe if she has any idea where Lionel or Emily might have gone. Pondering the situation, Chloe deduces they likely chose a restaurant with private rooms for a serious conversation, but notes there are many such places in the area. Feeling defeated, Ernest remarks that they seem to have hit a dead end in their search for Emily. Suddenly, a glowing magical light catches Chloe's attention as she looks out into the distance. A magical communication letter materializes before an utterly surprised Chloe. Chloe quickly deduces the letter isn't from Lord Lionel, noting that while he can use magic, His Highness is currently accompanying him on a secret outing. Reading the brief note that says, "Dorothy thanks," Chloe lets out a small sigh of relief. Armed with new information, Chloe confirms that Emily is indeed still with Lord Lionel. Eager for progress, Ernest immediately asks if she was able to find out Emily's exact location. Chloe confidently reveals that Emily is at a nearby restaurant. Sighing heavily, Chloe remarks that Lionel's jealousy has blinded him again and suggests they go there as well. Inside the establishment, the scene shifts to a tense atmosphere featuring a light-haired man and his dark-haired companion. Chloe approaches the location with a stoic and resolute expression. An elegant, brightly lit corridor leads directly to the doors of the Cuin Filet restaurant. Lord Lionel waits in a pristine white suit, exuding an imposing and sharp aura. Sitting across the table, a highly nervous Emily trembles in her floral dress. Beside Lionel, a dark-haired man sits with his eyes closed, projecting an air of absolute indifference. Glancing nervously at the stranger, Emily silently wonders who this mysterious person is. Mocking the situation, Lionel explains he brought a friend to witness their conversation, scoffing at the madness of an unmarried woman being alone with a married man in a closed room. As Lionel states he has something to say, a desperate Emily immediately interrupts by calling him her brother. Lionel violently recoils, his face contorting in pure disgust at being called, "my brother." Internally seething, Lionel reflects that this is his first time speaking to Emily and resents her acting spoiled just because she is his wife's sister. Flashing a chilling, fake smile, Lionel bluntly demands she stop calling him brother, declaring he hates women like her and finds it hard to accept she is Chloe's sister. Emily freezes, her eyes widening in absolute horror and disbelief at his brutal verbal rejection. Tears streaming down her face, a devastated Emily cries out that his words are incredibly harsh and painful. Staring coldly at her tears, Lionel ruthlessly asks if she is incapable of thinking about how her actions toward Chloe compare to his words. The dark-haired friend finally intervenes, telling Lionel that while he understands his feelings, he shouldn't go too far. A spark of naive hope ignites in Emily's tear-filled eyes as she looks toward the man. Deluding herself entirely, Emily beams with relief, mistakenly believing the dark-haired man is standing up for her. Shattering her illusions instantly, the dark-haired man crosses his arms and mutters that she will get even more annoying if she keeps crying. Utterly bewildered by their cruelty, Emily wonders why they are treating her like this, only for Lionel to command her to be quiet because she has become annoying. Emily sits completely paralyzed, her spirit absolutely broken by the overwhelming hostility. Watching her crumble, Lionel notes to his friend that Emily suffered a considerable shock because her usual manipulative tricks completely failed. Unmoved by the drama, the dark-haired man bluntly tells Lionel to wrap it up quickly and not waste time. Lionel agrees without hesitation, ready to deliver his final blow to the shattered girl. Shifting his focus entirely back to her, Lionel formally and coldly addresses Lady Emily. The dark-haired man sharply demands she keep her response short, making it clear they are not free to entertain her. Trembling under their harsh gaze, Emily desperately pleads with Lionel to let her see her sister, prompting him to coldly ask why. Bursting into anguished tears, Emily screams out that she must see her because Chloe is her older sister. Desperation overtaking her, Emily fiercely insists that even though Chloe is his wife, Lionel cannot deprive her of her right as a sister to see her. Maintaining his composed yet sharp demeanor, Lionel silently analyzes Emily's dramatic outburst. He immediately questions her actual intentions, demanding to know what she plans to accomplish if she actually gets to see Chloe. Narrowing his eyes with cold suspicion, he presses the trembling girl to reveal exactly what they need to talk about. Caught entirely off guard by his relentless interrogation, Emily falls into a nervous, stammering silence. Pressing his absolute advantage, Lionel bluntly asks if her grand plan was simply to complain to Chloe about her failing engagement. Paralyzed by the terrifying accuracy of his accusation, Emily freezes as her selfish motives are dragged into the light. Staring her down with piercing disdain, Lionel asks if she has conveniently forgotten the immense damage she inflicted on her sister. He sharply reminds her of the devastating letter she wrote, letting the crushing weight of her past actions hang in the air. Visibly disgusted by her sheer audacity, he demands to know just how far she is willing to go to keep hurting Chloe. Quoting her vile demand to cancel her engagement to Ernest, a furious Lionel asks if she feels any shame for uttering such repulsive words. Laying down his absolute final verdict, he declares that the Duchy of Caesarea will not interfere and that Chloe will remain entirely out of reach. Delivering a cold, dismissive glare, Lionel states that he has absolutely nothing left to say to her. Completely crushed by his unyielding rejection, a devastated Emily chokes back a bitter, agonizing sob. Breaking down into a hysterical wail, she cries out that it is unbearably cruel to completely strip away her right to see her only sister. Glancing away in sheer annoyance, Lionel internally notes that he could easily just walk out of the room right now. However, he calculates that abandoning a screaming woman in a restaurant would inevitably ignite disastrous rumors among the staff. Sobbing uncontrollably, Emily lashes out at the world, crying that everyone wrongfully accuses her of stealing her sister's fiancé. Desperately defending her actions, she screams that Chloe's engagement to Ernest was merely a loveless political arrangement forced by their father. Thrashing against her deep-seated insecurities, She wails about the sheer unfairness of Chloe always being the one praised and admired. She frantically admits that Chloe is undeniably beautiful, smart, and kind, swearing that she truly loves her perfect sister from the bottom of her heart. Pushing her narrative of victimhood, Emily cries that despite her endless shortcomings, she is genuinely trying her absolute best. Begging for an ounce of validation, she insists that even if she can never step out of Chloe's massive shadow, she is constantly striving to be just like her. Shattered by constant societal rejection, she sobs that no matter how hard she tries, everyone constantly brands her as a failure. A heavy, haunting silence falls as Emily vividly remembers the disgust in Ernest's eyes, a look that made her feel absolutely filthy. Watching her pathetic breakdown, Lionel internally acknowledges that despite Emily's crippling inferiority complex, her love for Chloe might actually be genuine. Suddenly cutting through her delusions, the dark-haired witness bluntly declares that she has completely misunderstood the entire situation. Stepping into the fray, the dark-haired man drops a bombshell, revealing that Chloe was deeply hurt because she truly loved her former fiancé from the depths of her heart. Driving the emotional blade deeper, he adds that Chloe is likely still carrying that agonizing pain even now. Struck by this world-shattering revelation, Emily gasps as her entire naive perspective violently crumbles to dust. He forces the sobbing girl to imagine the sheer agony Chloe endured while watching the man she loved for years end up in her younger sister's arms. Relentlessly continuing his reality check, he explains that Chloe selflessly stepped aside because she genuinely wanted Emily to be happy. The devastating reality of Chloe's hidden sacrifice finally pierces through Emily's self-centered illusions, leaving her in a state of stunned paralysis. Outraged by her hypocrisy, the dark-haired man demands to know if she ever considered the scandalous rumors and ruined future Chloe faced after the betrayal. Trembling with newfound horror, Emily is forced to confront the agonizing truth that she personally destroyed the future of the sister she claims to love. Frantically trying to justify her unforgivable actions, a panicked Emily screams that Chloe easily found a better match and is now a duchess anyway. Sighing at her hopeless delusion, Lionel dismisses her as a sheltered, naive girl who knows absolutely nothing about how the real world works. Leaning in with an intimidating glare, the dark-haired man brutally condemns her selfish belief that it is acceptable to hurt a strong person just because it benefits her. Disgusted by her toxic mindset, he angrily asks if she thinks it is perfectly fine to inflict pain on Chloe simply because Emily views herself as weak. Stepping forward to defend Chloe's honor, he passionately declares that true strength does not make a person immune to agonizing heartbreak. He reveals the heartbreaking truth that Chloe hides all her suffering behind a selfless smile just so Emily can live without feeling guilty. Lowering his voice to a solemn whisper, he emphasizes that Chloe bears this unimaginable weight simply because she is an incredibly kind soul. Furious at her relentless selfishness, he questions how Emily can claim to love her sister while continuously finding new ways to hurt her. A tense, suffocating silence stretches across the room as the dark-haired man's piercing words strike deep into the core of Emily's conscience. Delivering his final piece of advice, he demands that if she truly loves Chloe, she must finally start thinking about her sister's feelings instead of her own. Completely broken by the crushing weight of reality, a shattered Emily lowers her head in utter devastation. Suddenly shifting his attention toward the door, the dark-haired man politely excuses himself and invites their eavesdropper inside. The ornate door slowly creaks open, revealing a familiar silhouette stepping into the tense atmosphere of the private room. Emily's tear-filled eyes widen in absolute disbelief as she registers the unexpected arrival. Fresh tears immediately well up in her trembling eyes as an overwhelming wave of emotion completely washes over her face. Gazing down at her crying sibling with a gentle, forgiving smile, Chloe finally steps into the light and greets her sister.